It is 6 o'clock, so I will call the meeting to order. Alicia, can you please do roll call?
Yes. Lori Blargen.
Here.
Ian McDonald. Matt Foucault.
Here.
Lacey Oster.
Here.
Bruce Blargen.
Here.
Cherie Link.
Here.
Marge Willow.
Here.
Our district mission: together we engage, educate, and empower all learners, bridging their passions to pathways to create successful futures and positively contribute to our local and global communities. Is there a motion to approve our agenda tonight?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will move on to public comment. I did not receive any requests. Shannon, did you receive?
I did
any?
not.
Okay. So then moving on, we will go to our 21-22 seclusion and physical restraint report. So Abby, you are up.
You all received the report in the agenda. You'll see there is a bigger discrepancy of numbers from last year to the prior year. I would say last year was a tricky year for our students who, so a student to be able to be in special ed land, to have seclusion and restraint, it has to be within their IEP, and it's part of their behavior plan, written in there and agreed the steps of when that would be used with that student. So Pam and I had a lot of meetings last year, and I think we're going to continue to see a trend a little bit for the next few years with some of our younger students who are really struggling with some mental health concerns and being safe. And so luckily we're able to put some pieces in place to keep them safe, and unfortunately sometimes that's the seclusion and restraint. So we're always trying to change programming, adjusting support for the students, but the reason why it's in their IEPs is because we know that it's a possibility for some of our students. So any questions for me?
Okay, thanks. That was less than 5 minutes. Nice job. That was less than 5 minutes. So thank you. Okay, then moving on to the overview of our 2022 state testing data. Who's going to start us out?
Trish.
I'm going to kick us off. Do we have
Okay.
a clicker by any chance?
We'll just see.
Well, alrighty then.
I think it's
Working?
touch, yeah, if you.
All right.
What's happening?
Ours will be less than 5 minutes too. Just kidding. All right. Well, I get to kick us off and launch us. A little bit of background information as we have some new board members. We have had access to our student data, both achievement and growth, since this summer. We've been combing through it both with, as an administrative team, as building leadership teams, and also with our staff to get to know how we did over the last several years. You know, our student assessment data both is for achievement and growth and subgroups as well. It comes from a larger system, our Wisconsin Student Assessment System, which is largely based on these 4 different tests. Our forward exam is for grades 3 through 8 in English Language Arts and Mathematics. We do that across the board. That's our largest test. We see it also in grades 4 and 8 for science, and grades 4, 8, and 10 for social studies. The dynamic learning maps is our alternative assessment. We only do that for less than 1% of our students. Those are for our students who do not follow. There are students with IEPs, but they are for our students who really don't do the same standards as the rest of our students. It's a very, very, very small percentage of our students who we have very specialized curriculum for. So it's an alternative assessment that follows along in those same grade levels across the board. At the high school, we use ACT Aspire. This will be the last year for ACT Aspire. We did not renew our contract with the Wisconsin Department of Education. It's retiring this year. This will be the very last year. It's for grades 9 and 10. We test English, math, reading, science, and writing. We will be bringing on the pre-ACT Secure in spring 2023. One nice thing about the new assessment that's coming on board, it's much shorter. So it's a shorter exam, much more focused exam. We're learning a little bit more about it as they're rolling it out. So more to come on that. We'll see how that fares. They are doing some alignment work right now, so we'll see how that all pans out. That is all online. ACT is still on the docket for 11th graders for reading, English, mathematics, science, and writing. So as we look at all of these assessment scores, these are all spring assessments that we prepare for across the year. They are all aligned so we can also measure growth for our students. All of the scores that you're going to see tonight from our principals as they are sharing them with you, our student scores for achievement and growth, are the scores that we're pulling from Wise-Public. There's a link here if you'd like to take a look at those. That's important to note because Wise-Public, the scores that you see there are based on enrollment. When we look at test scores, they're all configured just a little bit differently. The scores that are public for you and for others from Wise-Public are based on all students enrolled. So if a student is opted out, if a student doesn't complete one portion of the ELA exam, so we have to nullify the rest of that test, they're counted as not proficient. So any student that does not complete the test, any student that does not take the test, any student that a parent opts out are considered not proficient, regardless. So even if they are top of their class and they do not complete the exam, considered not proficient. So when we look at our students in-house, they might be doing better than our scores might reflect there. So something to consider. When our report cards become public, which will be a month from now, you'll see a little bit different numbers because we are not configured the same way. So you'll see a little different numbers when we come back to the table in a month from now. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Pam for our elementary data.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. So as Trish was saying, my 3rd and 4th graders test in the forward exam, and I really use this data to kind of drive our continuous improvement plan and to tell us how we're doing in our standards work and to tell us how we're doing with our curriculum. As Trish said, our non-participating students count against us, and I did have some non-participating students this year, so I think my report card will look a little bit better. As you can see, our English language arts were at 51.3% proficient, just a little bit above half. Good news is the proficiency increased by 4.5%. Trends disaggregated by our subgroups, so students with disabilities increased proficiency by 9.1%. And our economically disadvantaged students, now this is in English language arts, increased 18%. So nice increases there. Our math proficiency was 61.9%, and that was a 6% increase for our students in math. Our students with disabilities in math decreased by 4.5%. So of course that's going to be something we're going to take a look at. Why did that happen? What things might have made that occur? And our economically disadvantaged increased their proficiency by 10%. So in all areas, we are above the state average in all tested areas, so that is a nice place to be. Our proficiency in 4th grade science, remember 3rd graders don't take science or social studies, 4th grade increased 3.3%, and in social studies they increased 79.8%, but it's a completely different test, so you're not comparing apples to apples, you're just comparing proficiency scores, one assessment to the next assessment. Will you click, please? Thank you very much. So here's some areas of growth and focus. What I'm really laser focused on this year is the tools we have to teach ELA. We know we did not have a research-based good ELA curriculum, so we've rolled out a brand new curriculum this year. Typically when there's a new curriculum, you get what's called implementation dip, which means drop. I am really intentionally, purposefully working to hope that doesn't happen because we have been growing every year, bits by bits, and we want to get above that higher than 50% mark and stay above that. So intentional focus on students with disability and that decrease in math. We want to talk about why did that happen? What practices, what do we need to do? As a building, we've really talked about what are our collaborative teams time like? What is it when we're doing that important work with standards? So we really are working on growing as collaboration teams in order to grow our students and really impact our practice. And then refining around our academic and our behavior systems. I'm going to talk about behavior a little bit, but here is my overall goal. So by spring, I want to grow an additional 5%, so to get my proficiency from 51.3% to 56.3%, and really combating that implementation dip and making sure that our kids are where we need them to be, we don't go backwards. So a little bit more about, can you hit the next please? So really other areas of growth and celebration and focus, for me really, academics, yep, but also the social emotional learning for our students and what's happening in terms of behaviors in our building. So as you know and you've heard me talk about, we are a responsive classroom school. We also focus on restorative practices. So last spring, all of my staff was trained again in responsive classroom, how to sustain it, how to keep it going. And then new staff was trained this summer, this summer. And then I'm bringing Catherine Cranston back to a staff meeting and then for a professional development day to really keep our restorative practices going. And I'm so excited we've been able to go back to having all school morning meetings and community building assemblies and things like that, and just really growing our responsive classroom practices. So overall, our building behaviors, reported behaviors, have decreased in incidences from 2021, we had 174, to 21-22, we had 117. And I really hope we see that continue to decrease into the next school year. Questions? Okay, then off to Sarah.
Hi, good evening, everybody. All right, so I feel like we have a lot to celebrate in the middle school, coming off of what we would consider almost a more difficult year, just kind of with all the things last year than the year before even was. Awesome news, we had achievement increase for all of our tested subject areas. Every grade level gets tested in my building, 5th through 8th grade. Everybody takes math and ELA, and then 8th graders also get science and social studies. So we are all above state average. We had a 5% increase in ELA, 11% increase in proficiency for math, 5% in science, and then 22% increase for social studies. And a big note of celebration is 75% of our 8th grade students were proficient or advanced on that social studies exam. So the work that we're doing in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade as a collaborative are getting the kids to where the state says we need them to be. And then another big kind of celebration, we had school-wide proficiency go up by 3.9% in math. So that's a big growth. And on the right-hand side, you can see why, which is extremely exciting. Our disaggregated groups, our two main disaggregated groups that we look at, our students with disabilities and our economically disadvantaged students, all had big increases for both ELA and math. Our building goal last year was actually looking to increase our students with disabilities proficiency by 3% in ELA, and we hit 3.4, which is a huge celebration, 4.2 for economically disadvantaged students. And then in math, our students with disabilities increased proficiency by 5.4% and our economically disadvantaged by 7.9. So we're getting growth out of some of our disaggregated groups that we're really targeting, which is an extremely positive thing, while at the same time our students that are not identified in those areas are also growing in their proficiency. So that is pretty fantastic. All right, thank you. We do, though, want to continue with that growth and focus on ELA. This is year 3 of an implementation of our resource study sync for 6th grade through 8th grade. So we did see that dip. We're working to get and continue to get rid of that. And like Pam stated, our resource adoption that we did last year was a K-5 adoption. So my 5th grade kids and my 5th grade teachers are working with a brand new resource this year that they have already reported to me is much more rigorous than what they were using before. It is challenging the kids. And I have a son in there who is far more engaged in ELA this year than he's been in the past, because just kind of the topics they're using and things. So looking forward to some great work there. My teachers are working super hard in that piece. As a building, like Pam had stated, we're working on our collaborative work so that we can achieve our learning goals and impact teacher practice. Our goal this year as an entire middle school is to have a clear focus on our formative and unit assessments, as well as when we get together to talk about how kids are doing, how is that impacting what we're doing with them in the classroom, right? Every conversation should have something about how are we growing ourselves as educators in order to help kids. Given the fact that my ELA proficiency is not where we want it to be yet, our goal this year is to also increase our proficiency rate by 5%. Last year we were at 45.3. I want to get over that 50% threshold this year. And so as it's measured by our ELA and reported by WISE-Public, as Trish reported, you know, it looks a little different in WISE-Public than it will when we look at every kid individually. So that is our goal for for this year. Just to speak to kind of what we've started already, all of my students in some way, shape, or form are getting some sort of reading. Whether they're already at grade level and we're going to push them further, whether they really need some extra support. We've got the time built in our day where kids are having the opportunity to just sometimes practice reading, but also get that additional support piece so that they are. My social studies team has really wrapped their arms around document-based questions where kids are interpreting charts and graphs and writing and making claims using evidence in order to boost that writing piece as well, because we know that'll translate far beyond just a social studies classroom. All right. And then a few other areas to celebrate and focus on. Last spring, our 6th through 8th grade students took the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. That is something that the DPI has every other year, although I heard they might be changing it to every year. We're not 100% sure if we're going to go that route quite yet. But this takes a look at risks our kids could take or they may be exposed to. And it was pretty awesome because with all of the things happening in our world, we've seen some really awesome growth in our students' sense of belonging at school, which has been a focus area for us, that teachers care about me at school, and that they have an adult at school that I can go to. So looking at our data from 7 years ago to 5 years ago to 3 to now, like much improved. And then again, I know I talked about this with you last spring, a reduction in the level of feeling bullied at school. It has dropped. So that is also those efforts that we're putting in through our advisory work, they're paying off. What we did see an area of concern is the level of self-reported anxiety in our students. You know, sitting down with my school counselors, looking at what can we do to try to help with that. You know, is it really anxiety? Are they struggling with understanding how they're feeling? Whatever that might be, we don't have the answer because we don't know who the kids are, but we have, you know, some thoughts about how we can work to address that. We're continuing to focus on restorative practices. I too am bringing Kathy back. She's going to spend a whole day running circles in my building, and then she's going to meet at a staff meeting, and then Pam and I are collaborating to kind of split our time on a professional learning day to work a little bit more with our staff. We're going to continue the work that we've been doing with our top 20 training through advisory, with our community building circles on Thursdays. And then my school counselors this year, along with myself and then Joe Hutter, our behavior coach, are going to work on building our students' mental habits, right? So how can we foster some resiliency so when things don't go the way we want them to, like it's not over, you know, we can find some ways through that. So how can we get our kids to kind of stop and push pause a little bit? So that's some of the work that we've got going on for this year in the middle school. Questions? Thank you.
Oh no, it's Janet first.
Well, I'm not. Andrew and I are kind of tag teaming this as we're bringing him along into the high school data. So, all right, so similar to these two buildings, lots of things to celebrate looking at our spring assessment data from last year at the high school. I'll start with our forward exam. So that was our 10th graders. 69% of our students scored proficient or advanced. The state average is 52%. That was almost a 30% increase from the year before. That team really dug in last year into going through all kinds of data, kind of figuring out why our kids weren't where they wanted them to be. And frankly, just put a whole lot of hard work and effort into instructional practices that they needed to assess to kind of figure out where can we kind of dig in. So that is a huge celebration. When that data came out, one social studies teacher for sure was literally in tears, just so excited of, man, we've been doing all this work and the kids nailed it. So that was exciting. ACT Aspire, so our 9th and 10th graders combined for ELA, 52.8% of students score proficient or advanced. State average is 35.6, so that was a 13% increase from the previous year. I threw this in here, it's just kind of nice sometimes to have a visual of like what does that look like year to year. This is the last 5 years, as you remember, 1920, most of our student assessment data, since they didn't take them other than the ACT, is kind of a gap. But obviously anytime we can see lines head this way, that's going to be a good thing, so we're really excited about that. Looking at the Aspire, again, 9th and 10th graders for math, so we had 41% of our students score proficient or advanced. The state average is 33.2, so anytime you're above state, big celebration. Just over an 8% increase from 2021, so again, you can kind of see heading back in a great direction. Obviously, as we knew, 2021, lots of things took a hit, but Again, you're gonna see in most of the charts I have up here, things are trending the right way, which we're excited about. Okay, so ACT Aspire. So this is just for last year's 10th graders, current juniors. So I wanted to point out two big celebration areas. So looking at math, again, just our current juniors, 49% proficient or advanced, 33% is the state average. Again, you can see from 18-19 gap year to 2021, obviously that was a big dip. Don't like to see that. And huge increase, which is now well above where we have been in the last 5 years. So a lot of time, effort, and energy again there. That class really knocked it out of the park. And then ELA, almost 60% of our kids proficient or advanced. State average is 36%, which is significant above. Again, you can kind of see where we've been over the last couple years. Again, no surprise here, 2021 took a big dip, and now we are well above where we have been in the last 5 years as well. So lots of work happening across lots of teams and departments in that building. So really good things, again, great things to be able to celebrate. All right, so looking at the ACT. So I had shared this with you already, so this is something you've already seen in your email, but I just put it up here again. I want to kind of caution against the comparison so much as just for context. You've heard me say that before, even the state of Wisconsin cautions what I put up here, but people do it anyway, so I want to make sure, frankly, I was just upfront of kind of where we were. So this was our ACT composite for last year. We were at a 20.6. You can kind of see not only schools in our conference, but just regionally, schools around us, kind of where we fell. State average was 19.2. That's typically kind of where we start to see where did we fall. So 20.6, that was an increase of 1.5 points from the previous year, and the highest composite score since 17-18. So speaking of kind of looking at where we are compared to ourselves, I went back all the way from 14-15 through this past year. Again, just to give you an idea of in general where our ACT composite has fallen year to year. You know, you'll see from 14-15 through last year, we only had 1 year where we hit above a 20, so 21, right? We had a 20.4 here, a 20.8, so that 20.6 is looking pretty darn good. I put a few more things in here just for some context. 18-19 is when we made our big master schedule change. You can see the following year we were at a 20.4, but unfortunately that score doesn't factor into anything with our student achievement or our report cards because they didn't count it, which would have been a bummer for us because that would have been helpful. Obviously this was our COVID year and then kind of where we're sitting now. So really again, just for some idea of kind of, okay, where have things been the last couple of years, because I know I hear a lot of dialogue of like, we've been at the bottom forever and we're doing nothing but going down, and we've got lots of kind of data points to show that as a general statement that isn't exactly accurate. So, but again, trending in a great direction. Kids worked really hard. You know, these things, all of these slides that you see, not just for the high school, but for these other two buildings too, don't just happen because we show up every day. You've got teachers and kids working really, really hard. Okay, next slide. So areas for growth and opportunity. So looking at our current 10th graders, 9th graders last year that took the Aspire, students in math scoring proficient and advanced, we saw a decline, so that's something we're going to have more dialogue and discussion about. ELA, we saw a slight increase, but again, something we want to be able to kind of take a look at for that group of kids in particular and make sure that we're being attentive to the supports that they may need. Looking at the ACT, this is probably one of the biggest pieces that we're having some discussions about within our science team. You can see there was kind of a big hit here. Again, our current 12th graders, juniors last year, for students scoring proficient and advanced. So this just causes us to ask some questions of what's been happening, what do we need to look at, those kinds of things, and they're already digging into that. And again, our math for our current 12th graders, last year's juniors, saw a slight increase, which was good, but numbers that we want to see going up even more. The last thing that I have for this before Andrew takes over, Trish had kind of alluded to this a little bit too. Over the last, I would say, multiple years, and I would say COVID really kind of kicked this into high gear, are the amount of high school kids opting out of state assessments. Not so much the Aspire. Our 9th and 10th graders are pretty consistent. Our juniors are the ones that we are having to do a lot more work to kind of talk to kids individually about taking that assessment. You've heard me say this before, by the time kids hit junior year, especially spring of junior year, many of them have a good idea of maybe what they're going to do upon graduation. If their post-secondary plans involve going to a four-year school that doesn't require the ACT, Many students are now saying, I don't need to take it. If they're going to a 2-year that doesn't require the ACT, again, students are saying, nope, I don't need to do it. So we're having a lot of conversations with individual students and families of making sure they don't close any doors, right? Lots of scholarships still use ACT scores. And of course, we still want to have a good gauge on where the kids are in our building. So that's not necessarily in our control, right? Parents have the option to opt kids out of any assessment that they want to, but certainly something that we're starting to see year after year now, kind of hitting year 3 of more and more kids that are opting out. So just something to keep an eye on. Again, nothing we can necessarily control per se, but trying to have some good conversations around it. So, okay, I think Andrew's up.
So yes to all that, and I wanted Shannon to do it because that was all her work, and the staff and the students, so thank you for doing that because that was all her. A lot of growth. So right, anecdotally, for a couple months, through interviews, through observation, seeing for staff, huge care and concern for students, families, community, and each other. Same thing with students. And other growth areas noted that kind of is the direction for our goal is the utilization of our academic supports that we have in the master schedule. We're collecting other systemic data. I know there's a lot of jargon out there that we're really digging into here. I'm going to hit the next slide. So really what that looks like is if we have all of these things in place, the markers would indicate that our kids are at grade level or above. And so instead of focusing on winning, we're going to focus on the little things that will get us to win. And so being in 8 buildings in 6 districts, we've never inherited, or I've never been able to get to a master schedule that we haven't fought and we haven't got there. And so we have it. And so in the short time I've been here, like, we're kind of running it like this, even though we have like a bunch of bells and whistles, and we haven't even hit the surface yet in terms of what we can do, which is really exciting. So we're really taking the time to make sure we understand what those buttons are so we can go super fast instead of working super hard. And so, right, like the work that Shannon and the staff and the students have done, like they're rowing super hard. And to be honest, I don't know how much harder they can row because, like Shannon talked about, there were tears, there was frustration and anger because teams are working hard and they care a lot and they're not seeing it. So we're, again, taking time to align that, to tap into our boaters and take off. And so there's a good start of high reliability schools that we've started. So as we do that RTI pyramid work, it's just a visual. The way we go about it is through safe and supportive collaborative culture as we put those components into place. And really, as we do that, continue to foster a strong culture of wellness for our staff, students, and families. Again, being data focused and seeing growth. In December through February, as we prepare for staffing, really talking about who we are, so be prepared for a survey in terms of what is the mission and vision and purpose of Somerset High School. And then we're really going to align our time, our resources, our money, and our people so that we see the outcomes of our hard work. And so our goal then is really looking at that tier 1. There's things that leadership needs to ensure is in place, and there's things that teacher teams need to ensure. And so the different colors mean blue, they might be in place, might not be. Red is we're feeling that they're really not, with artifacts and other things. And black is, yep, they're in place. So really, our goal is to ensure by the end of the year, our tier 1, the first time we teach, the first time we pre-teach is our best teaching. And so again, as we work through that from our leadership team to our staff, we're going to see the efforts of their hard work and care. And again, tap into the master schedule that is so rich and has that opportunity. Any questions for me?
I feel like I need to give you like a breather here. It's a lot of information happening, but exciting. So just before I kind of transition to my stuff here, any questions for Trish or the principals, or just kind of rolling through your head right now?
I just have a quick question with students who opt out, and it kind of goes with everyone. Are you seeing, I mean, I heard it, I think, across the board. And then as Sarah was like talking about that anxiety piece, like test anxiety, are you seeing those numbers of parents who choose to opt out? Because even in high school, they still need a parent signature or parent permission to opt out. Are you seeing that increase every year, the kids that are opting out of testing? on all ends?
I can say last year at the elementary school, it significantly increased.
Okay.
And most of the parents' reasoning was they did not want to stress out their kids. They didn't see the value in it enough to stress out their student.
So what do they do instead?
We have staff members that work with them and, you know, they do, kind of had them, there was a group and they did activities together. So they used to do reading and math and stuff, but just a small group with another teacher. But you're right, Lori, because it's a lot of days of testing and.
Right.
Mhm.
I keep-
No, go ahead.
I can't speak to the high school here, but I know, right, in terms of a typical kid's need to take ACT is might not be as high as it used to be, right? Not colleges, universities, some of them are going away from it. We have other kids that are on different pathways, so we are trying to engage and look at what kind of tests would someone need going into the trades, what kind of, and trying to also get them to take the ACT, but recognize as we have different paths for kids, an ACT score might not be as useful or beneficial, but also trying to just, like we talked about at school like Google Meet, that no matter what it is we do, like our Spartan way is just being excellent in everything, not just turning it on or off. So hopefully we can get more to take it, but we're also looking at different tests that give these groups of students the information they need for wherever they plan to go. And so that would be my 2 cents so far at high school.
I did not have as many opt-outs last year as I had the prior year. So it just, with that, it kind of ebbs and flows.
Yeah, I just asked because I think it's important to note the
Yep.
piece where Trish said like that shows negative on our
It does.
end. And
Yep.
as a parent with kids who have test anxiety, I've been one to think about it, you know, and I just wonder, like, if parents do that, are they made aware of some, I mean, they have that right to do it, but I just am curious about those numbers and how that looks.
The one thing to note is that through WISE Public, you know, it's proficient or not proficient. And that's a ding on when we look at test scores for our district and how we look to the
Right.
outside public. But bigger than that, through federal accountability, when we start seeing the federal identification packets come out, we have to maintain a level of test participation by subgroup. So they look at each subgroup, and if we don't maintain a certain level, then it becomes a funding issue where we start to get identified as a school who is not maintaining that, and then it becomes a bigger issue. Hopefully we won't get there, and it takes 3 years until we become identified and kind of put on a plan. So we're not near that yet, but at some point, but I believe this is a national trend. It's not just a Somerset trend, so no big, hair on fire yet, but it's a national conversation as well.
Yeah, I just think it's something important to note when we look at those numbers, that
Yes.
anytime that happens, I mean, be an understanding of it, because kids have different needs, but also be an understanding that that could affect our data as well.
I have a couple of questions also. So opting out of the test is taken as not proficient for the forward exam. How is it has no impact on the ACT or the Aspire though, does it?
It does on kind of proficient or not proficient, not on the composite scores.
So the ACT and the ACT Aspire, our scores are not dinged by high school kids opting out.
Any place where you see proficient or not proficient, it's going to be all or nothing.
Okay, and I think the only place that was with the social studies, I think for 10th grade, and that was part of the forward exam. So the forward exam that, you had a slide up there that said forward exam 10th grade. The only forward exam any high schooler took was 10th grade social studies, correct?
Correct.
And there, if they opted out, it was not proficient.
But on the ACT Aspire, it is proficient or advanced. So like math, proficient advanced was
Yes.
49.1, where the state was 33. So it would be on the ACT Aspire. Just the ACT composite.
Just the
is where
composite is the
proficiency
only
does
thing not
come
dinged.
into play.
Everything, every other subtest is
Yeah.
impacted by opt-outs.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anything at the high school level about the subgroups of special ed or economically disadvantaged, but I saw the big increases at the elementary and middle school, and I'm wondering how, and I know there's probably no way to prove this or to measure it, but the fact that we had 2 years of free breakfast and lunches for all of our kids, what a huge impact that could be making.
Yeah.
And we should, our state should continue to do that.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
With you on that one.
Yep.
That's interesting.
I agree. I don't think that should be dismissed whatsoever. I agree. Mm-hmm.
I really didn't think of
Yeah.
that connection.
What? Did you?
Paul, let's get legislative.
I will, as soon as I'm done with these slides, because I have a whole bunch. All right. Okay, so I'm going to transition to a couple pieces for me in particular. So, yeah, just talking the other day, like I feel like it's, since July 1 has been a whirlwind. That's been awesome and fantastic. And, as an administrative team, as you heard, even just from the things that they were each sharing tonight, we're working really hard to kind of dig into the things that are going well, the things that we know that we need to kind of pull apart and keep moving and grooving. We've got staff, we've got kids and people that are kind of sharing over and over that this year, the start of the year, feels really great. Feels a little bit more pre-COVID, which is awesome. Things are moving and grooving, so we're excited about where we're headed. Go ahead and click, there we go. All right, so I'm going to start with kind of my last piece of my 30, 60, 90-day plan, if you want to go ahead and click on that. Each 30 days, the list got a little bit longer. So again, I'm going to share this with you in the weekend update. This will go public too, so anyone can take a look at it. I kind of waited till I was done with everything. So I'm not going to read everything word for word, but as you can imagine, especially this last month, the referendum is taking a whole lot of time, effort, and energy to kind of get all of that organized and planned. Going really well, lots of community meetings. I'll talk about the referendum a little bit later in the meeting today too. But so lots happening there, which has been great. Attended the September PAC meeting at CISA 11, always excellent networking. Trish and I met with our CISA 11 consultant about our ESSER funds. Part of that is just to kind of help bring me up to speed about where we're at with all things ESSER. I know Trish is a pretty good expert, but I'm also wanting to make sure that I'm highly knowledgeable on our funds and where it's going, but Trish has been a great resource. Additional onboarding with JA Counter, just to look at some additional benefits. They've been sending me monthly reports of just our usage, which again has just been fascinating, and kind of see where our money is going and our benefits and where all that is happening, as that all kind of meshes together. We brought back student representatives to the school board meeting, so that was great. I know the 2 girls are already working hard on their next presentation and excited to come back, which is awesome. Working collaboratively with the admin team to finalize kind of the last pieces of data for our strategic plan, which I'll talk about next. Meeting with family therapy associates regarding mental health services for our students this coming year. We have a really strong partnership with them that we're excited to continue, and again, I'll hit on that too a little bit later. Research and prep for our first annual meeting that went out without a hitch, which was awesome, right? Participated in rapid cycle feedback training with the admin team to kind of shore up our educator effectiveness. Obviously Andrew being new, getting him on board with that process as well with our coaching feedback cycle. I've met with 3 businesses regarding potential financial partnership opportunities, so that's been great too, just to kind of get out and meet some people that I have not met in this new role and having some good conversations there. Meetings regarding summer school 22, starting to wrap things up there and already starting planning for 2023, which kind of got me thinking, would you guys like to hear like a summer school update? I was thinking about that. Lori's face is indicating yes, she wants to hear an update. So we'll get that on the agenda. We'll have Renee come in and give an update because lots of good work there. Attended the new Superintendent Academy and Workshop and my fall Superintendent Conference, which I've already talked about. Met with the DO staff and the admin assistants from the buildings to finalize our 3rd Friday count. Obviously that is a huge deal to our district, making sure we get that right, making sure we're all using the same process, so that was a important meeting to have. Looking at our enrollment process, getting into a 3rd grade classroom. I've got 4 more scheduled for next week to be a guest reader, which was super fantastic. All district homecoming pet fest last week, super fun. Anytime that we can get our entire district together, it is like pure energy, right? I mean, it was so fun watching the littles all the way to the bigs, which was great. Met with school age care coordinator regarding winter weather guidelines and just learning more about that program, which has been good. Sending home parent communication about our spring assessment data, organized our 2-night board retreat, which was awesome. Established timelines for building goals and admin team to complete their individual goals for 22-23. You obviously heard a lot about building goals here. We're starting our work this week. We're meeting with each of them individually to kind of shore up and finalize individual goals for the year, PPGs, and then we'll talk a little bit about timelines for collecting that evidence and monitoring their progress with that. Finalizing a 22-23 professional development plan, and just last week, leading the admin team through a process to establish norms for our meetings. So again, you know, this is a bit of a 50,000 foot overview. I don't necessarily document everything on this, you know, page that I do, but hoping at least gives you an idea of kind of the work that I've been engaged in for the last 3 months. Lots of learning. Again, just lots of really great things. I keep saying this over and over, I know in my updates and my emails, but so many great things are happening in this district right now, and I know we're excited to kind of see where this is going to go for this school year. So as I mentioned, I will share this with you. This will be public. We'll put it on our website. We'll attach it to the agenda as well in case anyone is really interested in what's been happening for the last 90 days. So with that said, we're going to transition back here. We're going to talk about the strategic plan. Okay, so this has been just a bit of a bugger because we didn't plan when this was created that we'd have a year of COVID where we'd have to kind of push 2 years together and then extend this beyond 1 year. So this year we're in kind of a funky spot. So this obviously is not new to you, right? These are things that were developed at the beginning of our plan for our mission outcomes and our core values. And these are things that administratively we talk about and reference all of the time. This really helps guide our work. I know these are two things that have been talked about at the building level, obviously beyond just this year. We are digging into our core values quite a bit this year, and I know that has been reflected in staff meetings, professional development, start of the year, things that we have done. Really because, if you want to click on this, I'm going to show you kind of where we are here. Technically, our strategic plan should have been done by now, and we should have had a new plan starting this year. With COVID and everything else, that didn't happen. So what you're looking at here, and again, I will share this with everyone, and this is going to be put on our website as well. So the admin team worked together to kind of wrap up all of the action plans that we were working on last year. Okay, so that is everything that you see here in red. These were the things at the start of last year we had decided as a district we were going to really kind of embark on, be able to gather some evidence for. So this is really kind of the evidence collection tool that we use for all of the things that we were working on last year. I realize this is hard for you to read from where you're sitting, so I will share it and you'll see it. But if you want to go to the next one here, sorry. Probably not a great way to do it. So in the interest of time, I'm not going through every single one of these slides. But what happened is basically as an admin team, we looked at the action plan statement. Okay, so this is what we were working toward. And then you will see on each slide the district-wide evidence that we gathered, right, to work toward the action step, okay? So this one, learner progress toward learner outcomes, guide strategic decisions and collaborative efforts. So you will see everything on here is about learner progress and learner outcomes. So what was happening across the district that fell into that action step, okay? This doesn't work, does it? Okay. The next one is design and develop comprehensive facilities for education, fine arts, and athletics. So everything you see here was the work that was done with our facilities committee, eventually leading to our referendum, obviously, but that was now this school year, so you don't see that on here. But all of the work that was happening there, and all of the pieces of evidence, you'll see some things linked here in terms of what did we do to try to get to that action step, okay? One more. Providing high-quality services and operations that are reliable and consistent, ensuring the satisfaction of students, staff, and community. So here's our school perception survey. Cross-training and some things that have happened at the district office level. Some things with devices, added instructional support, our mental health coordinator. So again, all of these things directly relate to trying to tackle that action step. That one is just an extension, some stuff in HR. Engaging the community in dialogue to explore year-round scheduling opportunities. So this was One of the action steps in our strategic plan was just to explore how people felt about year-round school. You saw in the school perception survey that people are like, no thanks. Great, so that's as far as we're gonna go for it at this point, okay? Continually refining educational delivery services through developmentally appropriate practices to meet the needs of present and future learners. So you will see multiple pieces of evidence that we collected to hit that action step. Looking at ELA standards, math standards, restorative practices, advisory, responsive classroom, which Pam has mentioned, a wide variety of trainings that took place. There you go. Student-led conferences, our college and career readiness team that was created by staff at the high school last year. The addition of AP and CIS classes, some expansion with our academy at the high school, and virtual learning. All right, diverse opportunities for students to engage in mentoring partnerships with community members, organizations, and businesses. This one has still been a little slow, again with the aftermath of COVID and things maybe not last year even necessarily being fully open and accessible, so we were getting as creative as we could, utilizing our work-based coordinator at the high school, Kelly Emerson, for some mentorship and shadowing, and some additional partnerships that happened through our business academy. All right, partnering with the community to improve the quality of life and create a stronger sense of community. So you'll see Bridging Somerset, work that we've done with the Chamber, our Facilities Planning Committee, our first annual HR Power Hour breakfast that happened last year, and the garden donation that happened at the elementary school. Is that the last one? Okay, so I'm gonna have you go back to, yep, right here. So really at this point, we don't have any more action steps to tackle with the strategic plan, okay? So what we are doing then for this year, as we are talking about our strategic planning, strategic thinking, I'm gonna bring it back to, this is really what we are focusing on at the building level and administratively as we work to prepare, essentially after Christmas, to begin the process of creating a new strategic plan, okay? And I'll talk about that when I get to my goals. So again, you know, this wasn't the ideal plan or the ideal way this was supposed to work, but with the way COVID kind of happened, kind of is what it is, right? Looking at knowing what we are guaranteeing our learners through our strategic plan, there is plenty here that we can be pulling apart and talking about and going back to and revisiting some of our action steps. And again, as we've mentioned, even talking administratively, there's a lot of bang for our buck here in terms of helping this drive decisions that happen in our buildings every day. Obviously, as you know, both of these, you don't see anything about specific test score percentages and those kinds of things. It's thinking a little bit bigger. But we feel good about being able to kind of continue to tackle these things at the building level and then start working toward that collaborative process of building a new strategic plan for next school year. Okay? All right, this is my last slide. So, if you remember back when we were doing our retreat with Lee, we had talked about goals, not only superintendent goals, but board goals as well. And through that process, this was the meeting that I was going to bring my draft. So really kind of, and I'll read through these, but my intent is to have you kind of take a look at them. Certainly you're welcome to discuss them as a board tonight. I can bring these back to the meeting in 2 weeks, whatever you as a board decide to do. But here are the 3 goals that I'm proposing for this year. In the 22-23 school year, I will prepare for, provide data, promote need, and present information to all stakeholders regarding the 2022 referendum. If you remember, our conversation around that at the time was certainly we have lots of fingers crossed that it passes, but either pass or fail, this goal is not done after November 8th. Lots more work has to be done afterwards, kind of whatever the outcome might be. Certainly in the last 3 months, I've been putting a lot of work into this already. So this is kind of step 1. Goal 2, in the 22-23 school year, I will successfully lead the process in collaboratively developing a new strategic plan. The goal then would be to have that plan be formally approved by the board at the April 17th, 2023 meeting. And then goal 3, in the 22-23 school year, I will review and evaluate curriculum and instruction as it relates to student achievement. Doing 3 things: bi-weekly meetings with principals and directors to review building goals, individual goals, and evidence of progress. Attending at least one staff meeting per month, and weekly building and classroom walkthroughs. So, this is my proposal. I know this is the first time you're seeing it, so I'm not expecting maybe a whole lot right now, but if you have feedback, I'm happy to hear it. But this is my first attempt at, here's what I'd like to focus on and work on. Maybe I'll just stop right there to gather any immediate thoughts if you have them, or the direction you'd like to go as a board. If you think they're ready to rock, great, we can do that too. Or if you want to think about it, you can come back at the next meeting, whatever works. Yeah, that's the last one.
I don't have any immediate feedback. I think they're good goals. You know, the referendum is a big one. It's going to take a lot of time, and the strategic plan as well. So I'm happy with them.
Read big, main areas.
Can we bring them back to the regular session, so we have some reflection time and time to
Sure.
email Shannon if there's any further questions?
You'll email that out. You'll send it out.
I can, yep, yep. Okay, so part two, sorry, I don't have a slide for that. These are here, so hang on, okay.
Should this be attached, should just that slide be attached to the agenda for your superintendent update?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have Alicia actually attach the whole thing.
Okay.
Yep. I didn't do it ahead of time because we wanted to be able to give some context before it's kind of open and seen, and then I'll have her do it at the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the other three things I had, so it sounds like from the listening session last time, there was a question about mental health services for our students. So, and you guys feel free to kind of weigh in here too, but just a couple things that I gathered that we currently do, and I wouldn't say these are necessarily new, but just kind of nice for people to be aware of. I mentioned our strong partnership we have with Family Therapy Associates. So we have counselors coming into every one of our buildings, working with multiple kids. Typically, halfway through the year or more, we end up with a waiting list because we have so many students that are trying to be seen, and unfortunately, not quite enough counselors that come. But right now, we feel really good about, I think we're entering year 5 or 6, maybe?
I think 6.
6, yeah. So that's been great. You know, the addition of our mental health coordinator, she's taken on a lot of responsibility working directly with families, working with mental health needs of our students, which has been great. Last year we started a partnership with Health Partners. They provide a therapist for us who runs a grief group called Growing Through Grief. So we're starting year 2. So they've been available to help our staff and students through some situations that have happened in our district, and also running groups for students who have lost a loved one. So that's been very helpful. Continuing strong family communication through our school counselors when things come up in the buildings, which seems to be more and more as the years kind of go by. Our counselors also run a variety of groups, and then just the day-to-day operations, things that happen in advisory, community building, our restorative practices, circles. Sarah mentioned YRBS that the middle school and high school takes a look at pretty intensely. Screeners that we use like My Savers to help find some flags if possible, and then doing what we can with that information. So I'm hoping maybe that, I wasn't at the listening session, and hoping maybe that's kind of what the person that was here was looking for, just a...
She was specifically asking about what new initiatives.
Yeah.
And I understand that we have many programs in place already. I don't know what else we could add.
Yeah.
I did have a question about the first one you were talking about. I think it was family therapy you called it. So often we hear in the news about the mental health crisis affecting our children. So this family therapy that we have coming into our school, there's always talk about not enough therapists to go around, that you can't get your kid in for an appointment. You know, the waiting list is like a year or more. Is what that program doing by coming into our schools, is it offering that type of service that we're hearing about on the news?
Can I answer that?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, so it's like if I wanted to take my child to an outside therapist, we offer space for them to perform the therapy. So it's simply, we provide the space They provide the therapist, they do all the insurance work, they do all those pieces. We provide the space for them to be able to use.
Yeah.
One of the other things that they talk about is that many of the therapists don't accept insurance, or that there's large additional co-pays. Do we have any information on that?
So Kelly Oman, our mental health coordinator with families who struggle with those kind of years, she was a social worker prior to this, so she really knows the ins and outs of how to help families apply for like qualifying for state insurance to be able to qualify. Because most of these places take family care and state insurance, so she's really helpful. That's who we connect families with to help them navigate those applications and be able to apply. And she knows other grants and stuff that are available through the county to help support students and families.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I just had two more quick things. So just a quick referendum update. So this Wednesday at 6:30 is our first community meeting. So I've been encouraging lots of people to attend. We'll have lots of people there to help answer questions and go through, big details of all the projects. So that'll be great. The mailer going home to all taxpayers should be in the mail, fingers crossed, at the end of this week. We have 5 videos that were just released. All of those are on our website. They've been on Facebook as well. I've been able to hit 20 community groups so far with still kind of a list to go, so that's been great. And I keep telling people, go to the website. We have so much information on there. If people are wondering, I had someone send a message today asking about a diagram. I'm like, yep, just go right to the website, there it is, and click on the heading, and everything you need is right there. So, but overall, things are going well and moving and grooving, and November 8th is going to be here before we know it.
Where's that one Wednesday?
They're both at the high school, in the multi-purpose room.
Bleachers gonna be out.
You bet, and we'll be banging up and down those stairs like nobody's business, right?
What time is it?
6:30. Yep. And the last thing I have for now, so each of you should have seen a shirt at your spot. So this past week was School Board Appreciation Week, and so on behalf of myself and the admin team, we want to thank you for your work. This is not easy work. Yep. People are clapping at home too. It's hard work, and it's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of preparation. I think people maybe don't always understand what goes into this to be able to do this well. So thank you. So the shirts that you have are from our very own school store. Students picked out a wide variety of styles and put the screen print right on there, and there you go. So thank you for all that you do, and I think you've heard me talk probably long enough tonight. So there we go.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay, moving on to the McGrath Consulting Wage Study Update. You're not quite done.
Well, Dave's name is
Well, Dave's
first.
with you for this
Yeah,
one.
so I'm putting that on him.
I'll move over here so I'm close to a mic.
Thanks, everybody.
I guess they already read it.
Personally,
Now or never, Trish. Are you?
Okay. So the long-awaited McGrath update study has come back. You have had a chance, hopefully, to read the executive report that she provided. We wanted to go over that again, similar to how you went over the testing data here in the meeting first, and then we'll link it to the agenda so it's public for everybody. And you can see that there's a few recommendations for immediate application from McGrath. And you can see some of the data where she has done some comparisons for our employee groups compared to the regional similar employee groups in similar positions. So as you've seen, one of the biggest things she recommended was the reduction of the pay grades 102 and 103, and putting all those employees into 104. We have some general fund paras, some paraprofessionals who are in 102 and 103. The majority of the people in 102 and 103 are school-age care kids club aides. And so we're going to have a more detailed proposal for that, because not only is that funded separately through community ed fund. It's not in the general fund. But there's also some additional licensing concerns and some plans that Leslie has where they have a lot of, she has implemented a lot of the required trainings and a lot of steps and procedures in place in that program for her staff. And so there's a different kind of structure that she's proposing that kind of ties into this anyway. So these things go together. We're working on the full costing right now with her. And again, that's funded differently. The plan is that that will continue as we have done historically, where the fees collected by the program pay for the program. There is always an option for a school board to decide to levy separately for community ed purposes, and that would qualify. But we're trying to get to the point where that isn't something that's needed for this, that it continues to be self-sufficient program. The only concern, the only discussion would be, and we'll get to this, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but would be, is it still cost effective? Is it similarly, do the cost families the same as regional school age care programs? Because that would be the point where you might say, well, maybe we should have a small levy for this, spread that cost around so it's just pennies to everybody rather than higher fees to people. But we'll get into that. We'll have the full costing upcoming and the full proposal from Leslie for how she wants her staff titled and placed in pay grades. So back to the general fund, Fund 10, we only have a few employees that are affected by the 102 and 103 move to 104. This creates compression. So when you eliminate a few pay grades and you say, okay, now you were in 102 or 103 and now you're in 104, the people in 104 say, well, what about me? That job was different, I'm still in 104, I don't get to move. But that is something that happens too when you eliminate pay grades, when you eliminate steps in a teacher salary schedule, there's compression, and so that some of that happens. And one of the ways we try to make it so people don't feel like it's unfair is if there's somebody in a place, if somebody's going to be hired at step 1 of 104, we would want to make sure that if we're moving people, they're not going to be placed in advance of somebody who's already there, in essence. So McGrath always places people at the step closest to their current rate, but we want to take into consideration people who are already in 104. But again, this is compression, and this is something that's just part of this proposal. The second thing that I had in the weekend update was the proposal for HR. When we talked to Victoria about some of our positions, some of our people, she brought up a concern for HR in specific, comparing our position to not just districts, but she also talked a bit about, she works with a lot of municipalities, a lot of counties, a lot of public sector employers, and she has strong opinions about HR, and we have grown our HR greatly over the years to our district's benefit, I would say. And so Victoria said, I think there's a big concern that you're not comparable with what the position is and what the position needs to be with similar employers, similar places that may hire this exact type of position, possibly from you. This is how she kind of framed it when she's saying a district our size needs to consider something a little higher level than what we have now. And she's also saying you should keep the current position and hire that when you can, again, or consider making that a specialist to support the proposed HR manager. But she strongly feels that, I think she said, around every 100 employees or so, you should have a dedicated HR person. And so we're around 200 employees usually at this point. And we have one dedicated HR. I also do some HR. Our payroll does some HR, but it's not dedicated every day this is what you're doing position. So from Victoria's perspective, and I would agree, this is a high value and high leverage position that we want to maintain, certainly. And beyond this change in pay grade, there's no proposal at this time to, as I said, rehire a position if we remove this one, or to change it to a specialist and fill that. We're not saying that. We're essentially proposing we want to reclassify it as proposed by McGrath, so that we can feel good that we will maintain it and we will keep it, because it's a very valuable position for our district, serving all of our employees. Another thing I wanted to mention was at the end of the executive report, she talked a bit about our specialty lanes. This is a couple specialty lanes for teachers in particular. If there's a special, in the past we said hard to fill position, a certain type of position, psychologists are in their own lane. Victoria had said this would be a good thing to consider changing to an annual stipend. And we have seen this in at least one other district next to us, where you evaluate this every year based on the market, based on the difficulty to fill it, and also based on credentials. So if something is just, you have fewer applicants, that doesn't necessarily necessitate that this becomes the specialty stipend for that year. But if there's additional qualifications, additional things, and this is really a position that's really difficult, then we would put in that stipend box, or however you want to call it, for that year. And it wouldn't just be for new hires, it would be for the staff that are currently here as well. We don't want them to leave. And so this is more of a recommendation to convert from lanes to this specialty stipend, evaluated on an annual basis with certain criteria in mind. I'm looking here, I think I covered the highlights. You can see also in the report, there was a fair amount of discussion that she added from some of the research that she does, where she's recommending that we consider going forward thinking about benefits. Are there things we can do to make this job attractive? If we can't offer higher wages, maybe there's some things, other things we can do, especially considering what might be taking place in the private sector, some of the perks or abilities to do different things. We should simply keep those things in mind and consider those going forward for our employees as well, to stay competitive. Shanna, did you have anything to add?
No, I think you hit the highlights. I mean, I know we'd been waiting a while for the report, which is great. I know Dave and I have had quite a few conversations about it, just kind of debriefing it and dissecting it of what does that mean? What do we, really want to take a look at in terms of thinking about some action? What can wait? I think we were happy to see, with the decision that you as a board made in July with lifting the schedule, that got teachers in a really great spot, which was wonderful. So I know that was a big celebration that we saw. I think, the two pieces that Dave mentioned, HR and then getting rid of those two, pay grades, I think would be probably the biggest next step that we'll bring a proposal to you for, and just of what we might think that looks like, so.
So this is representative of that pay increase in July? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So are there pieces of this that we're proposing to bring back to the regular meeting in a couple weeks for approval?
Are you saying, Shannon, were you just saying you would bring a proposal after this, before we would then put it on the next?
So we'll have the breakdown for Kids Club in particular.
Okay.
Because like I said, that it's not just the pay grade changes for that. Leslie has some recommendations based on how she has had to train and structure her staff. So there's a number of aides, Kids Club aides, that are affected by this 102 and 103 reduction. But additionally, there's a few changes that Leslie is proposing that we also support because of how she has to run her program and how she has to train her people on an annual basis. So it's all going to be a combined recommendation. And again, the plan is that this doesn't have general fund cost to the district. This is a program that's intended to fund itself. She has, I think you've all probably seen at this point, a couple of the grants that she's submitted where the district gets reimbursed for some of the compensation that we pay to her employees. She's been doing this now since the start of that availability early on in COVID. And so she has almost entirely through that built up a little bit of a fund balance in the community ed fund. And so we do have the ability to kind of spend that down a little bit over a couple of years if need be to pay for this without increasing rates quickly and affecting our community negatively in that way. So all of that, the plan is that we're working on this and we'll bring it back to the business session. I think I gave you the cost for all of the general fund proposals already.
I think it was like 23,000.
Yeah, 23, under 23.5. And I know Lori, you'd asked about the pay grade. It's a new pay grade. We can give you all the new schedule as well. Because it's just one pay grade that was added inside the salary schedule.
For what position, for what is that for?
That's for the HR manager.
The HR, so that'll be a recommendation in 2 weeks for the HR manager. Got it.
It sounds like there's going to be a lot of additional information though regarding the Spartan Kids Care.
It will be, there's a structure that's the recommendation. And Leslie will be here if you have questions about the details, like why do you want to have this position versus that position, or why do you want to title it this way? Essentially, the 102 and 103 to 104, that fits in her model. She has an additional, I think, moved to 1 to 105 and 1 to 106 within her structure. So it's not an excessive, big convoluted thing. It's just a couple of moves that aren't necessarily recommended by Victoria, but we also do things a little differently here in Somerset with our kids club than maybe the places that we were compared to. And Leslie has done a remarkable job defining roles, getting training, really getting the kids club set up, I would say, appropriately.
And she'll be at our next meeting and get questions.
And in the meantime, if you have questions, we can work that in as well.
Do you have any recommendations for the specialty pay changes, or is that going to come later?
I would recommend that we do change to that. It is something, logistically speaking, it would make it easier for me when I'm working on the costing and so forth, but also just process-wise, it makes sense. Because I think there's been a number of positions, number of people in positions in the district throughout the years who have said, well, I think I'm specialty. And I think us formally saying we will look at this on an annual basis, I think maybe benefits people, and that we're looking at these things and making those comparisons and decisions, and hopefully getting people placed appropriately with that stipend.
So you'll have something, potentially.
A proposal.
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we recommend changing.
Okay, so if you have somebody who's receiving a stipend because it's a particularly difficult position to fill with extra licensing needs or criteria attached to it, so this person is getting a stipend of an extra like $2,000 a year, and then all of a sudden we've got all these new people coming out of the program and it's not difficult to hire anymore. I think it's going to be difficult to tell a person, we're going to cut your pay now. It's not really a cut in their pay, but you're not going to get that stipend anymore. I mean, is that how you foresee this going? And that's why you want to look at it yearly, because a person might not get that stipend every year.
I think in practice, what we'll see is more people get the stipend. Lori, it would be a much longer timeline than we're talking about before we see more psychologists in the pipeline, right? This is something where, yes, technically it's a stipend on an annual basis, and technically, if there was a glut of these employees and we had our pick of 50 great ones, we wouldn't need this, would we? But that's not really our reality, and I don't think that's in the near future either. So what we're doing is we're saying we're going to examine the positions we have, and some of the people that have said, hey, I am a specialty teacher, I should be in the specialty lane, we agree with that. And we'll have our process in place to say, yep, your specialty.
So you foresee this, most likely, the stipend would be permanent,
I mean, it's a stipend, it's not permanent.
right?
Right now.
But I also don't, as I said, I don't know that we could expect that there are all these new applicants with these credentials and with these specialty skills in the market.
You mentioned another district, it's not a commonly done thing, but another district doing this. Do we have, I feel like in 2 weeks to bring this to say, oh, here's how we're gonna do it. This is gonna be a lot more detailed. You know, there's a lot of things that are gonna go into, well, what constitute as that specialty wage, what constitutes people getting that. So is there something to base this on that McGrath offered or that we're pulling from another district?
I have seen how another district does it. McGrath actually kind of went the other way and said, well, certainly there's a lot of positions that the market, you may not have the same number of applicants you used to have, or you may have few, but it can't just be that. And so if there's additional credential, and so I don't think that we're going to make it an extremely high bar, but there will be some credential, and so it's not a very complicated approach in how we envision it, I don't think.
I agree.
So from us, you would want just the approval to change the process?
Yep.
And then you're gonna figure it out?
Yes, and nobody, where they're at now, nobody would lose compensation from where they're at now going forward. People would be placed onto the regular salary schedule, and the dollar amount, we will propose to you a dollar amount.
And potentially step up? Any other, sorry, well, he's just saying nobody would lose compensation, right? But as you identified stipends, somebody could potentially receive a stipend on top of it, right? As you figure this out?
So few positions that are in specialty lanes right now. None of them are going to get that taken away. They're not going to not have the stipend. They will have the stipend for the foreseeable future. It's a matter of, let's assess also our additional positions in the district. Let's assess where the market's at and what it takes to teach that or do that job in the district, should that qualify.
Any other thoughts or comments or questions on, so you did the pay or the time off thing, the conversion of personal days, I think were personal days to,
It was sick days.
Or sick
days.
PTO.
yeah, so that went over well, I
Great.
assume. Any other thoughts in line with that? I know there was a whole section in here about just retention stuff. Anything else to offer? Or, I mean, we're kind of stuck with the school schedule, but.
A lot of the things, I read that too, she was talking about work from home and flex days, and it's just not gonna work.
I mean, is anything else that anyone is doing that we should be?
Well, so some of that doesn't work if you're in a classroom.
Right.
It may work if you're not in a classroom to some degree or another, you know. Our biggest employee group is teachers, but we have other kinds of employees as well. And so we have heard from other districts that they do some of these things. And it's really a mindset of if there's something that's easy to do to help us retain our good people, let's try to do that.
Where did you say the specialty fund stipend dollars would come from?
Just part of regular compensation.
So how did,
So it'd be a bucket of that.
So right now, if we just said we're converting from specialty lane to specialty stipend, there'd be no change in cost right this second. Right, but if we're going to be assessing and adding some additional positions, and whatever that stipend amount is, that would be the additional cost per position. And so we would just build that in on an annual basis. And we're talking, how many positions are we gonna think about here? Right, this isn't gonna be a huge cost on an annual basis, at least not a huge new cost. But
So Dave, when you say that, do you have any idea on the amount of the positions? Like just off the, I know that that's kind of a loaded question, but.
I think we're open to taking a look at a wide variety of positions because we've heard people say, I think I'm a specialty teacher.
Yeah.
Let's look at that. Let's assess that. Certainly there are some that should be right now, in my opinion, and I don't think that's controversial to say that. The dollar amount of the neighboring district that does this is $2,000 a year. That's the dollar amount. So it's not in excess, but it's something, right? It's better than nothing. And it's us saying this is a position that it's valuable to this district. We're glad you're here.
So you're gonna bring, possibly bring us a list of these specialty lanes?
Is that something you want to approve?
Yeah.
I was saying, you're not gonna give us a list, right? You're gonna change the we're gonna change the process.
Right.
And then it's on you.
Yes,
We don't need to approve every single stipend.
correct.
Well, I guess I'd sure like to know that we don't have, I don't know, I mean, I'd like to, I guess, know who our specialty stipend people are.
And I am pretty sure that the board has to approve pay. I mean, that's why we approve raises at a board meeting and when new people are hired. You know, part of what we're approving on the personnel update is supposed to be pay.
Also, as these specialty positions were identified, they'd come to a meeting as a consent item, correct?
Well, this will be, so the first time we'll do it will be for next year if approved, right? So we'll have all of our recommendations in place for that. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a package approval. That's how I would view it. You know, I don't know that the board would want to comment on whether you think something is specialty or not, but we will have a package recommendation.
So to clarify, sorry, this isn't something, and I get what you're like, this isn't something that, okay, this person is getting this stipend and we're gonna put this in that when we approve our personnel updates. Like, those names won't be, oh, XYZ gets the $2,000 stipend. But you'll present to us, this is the pool of jobs, of positions that would receive this, not necessarily per name, per individual position.
Well, certainly, you can easily determine who the people are, right? There's limited positions that are specialty, I think. But yeah, as far as I understand, we'll be proposing our specialty positions. But not necessarily additional detail, you know, though it's all available if desired.
I think just, and this is just me, I don't know how everybody else feels, I think it would be nice, I don't, you know, I think kind of to meet in the middle, like to not, you know, have the information, but I think if somebody were to come and say, hey, why don't I qualify for one of these special positions, to be able to back it with data that says, okay, this is what constitutes, this is a special position and this isn't.
But is that a
Because-
board rule? Isn't that?
I'm not saying it's a board rule,
Oh,
I'm saying
okay,
that
right.
they can provide, that
Right.
you can provide support for that. So it's not necessarily for us as a board.
You're right, yeah.
But it's for if you have, because we have a lot of wonderful staff and teachers, so I think just the advocate like in me thinking, hey, well, why don't I constitute for that, just to kind of, you know, whatever percentage, well, this is actually a position that we have had less than 2 applicants, or this is a position that a certain percentage of people are even licensed for, however that might fall. I think just to make sure that we have our data in place to be able to support the decisions that are coming.
Absolutely.
And then perhaps whatever that criteria is, when you figure that out, should probably be in the employee handbook, I'm thinking.
I would just hate, I'm like just looking at like, oh, if somebody didn't know all of the ins and outs of it, to say, oh, well, that person knows so-and-so, so they're getting this stipend, where to be able to back it, to be able to back why that stipend's happening. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, that makes sense, and I think to this point, we've had requests, and some times we may even say, yeah, that's a no-brainer, but there hasn't been any desire to pursue that and say, okay, you're in the specialty lane. There just hasn't been the will to do that, and I think it's a good time to assess that and have clear procedures on how we do that.
Well, and I think really looking into it, it might be helpful for us as a board because we have had situations in the last year where we've had to go into closed session because of situations where we've had some, you know, some positions that are harder to fill and asked for some of those pieces. So I think it, even to us, gives more of a, hey, this constitute where this is kind of the process we're following versus like, well, yes or no, how does that kind of fall?
So we have some established criteria.
Okay, any other questions for Dave? Okay, well, are we comfortable moving on? Perfect, thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, looking at the policy updates, there are several policies for first reading. This was originally on our work session for September, and we didn't get to the policies that are listed. So we've had these policies for weeks now as far as being able to have time to look through and go over. So we can, if people are comfortable, and policy committee, please take over for me if you'd like, but to go through, not every one word by word, but just to go through to say, are there any specific questions or comments on certain ones that can be added, similar to how we did in September? Is that? So going down the list, 3160 physical examination or 4160 physical examination. Are there any questions or comments considering either of those policies?
Yes. The attachment to the agenda is not the revised policy 1460 that the board approved at the September 26th meeting. So before we approve this at our next meeting, it would be helpful if the actual 3160 and 4160 were attached here with the same recommendations that were approved September 26th with 1460. What's attached here appears to be the active policy 1460 prior to our approval of the new 1460.
And that was addressed in an email that was sent out to us, right?
Yes,
Or is this
so
different?
Chris had shared that the previous policies, I have this email here, he put on the disposition sheet and didn't send them in as he thought he would send in the whole batch when all of them were approved. If your board approved those policies, they are the new document, and they are the new document even if they're not published yet. They are the word of the land once approved. So I don't know if that clears anything up or not, but I think that's why you're seeing what you're seeing, because he was waiting until this whole batch was approved before he made the mass changes. That's all right.
So we could still attach the draft version of 3160 and 4160 with the changes that we made.
Yeah, because when it gets submitted, it'll be the changes.
So I just want what we're approving on our next meeting to be what's attached.
Which should be the one from the September 26th, not the one that's on here.
Right. And now when I'm clicking on it, I'm not getting anything. So I don't know.
I got it. So you can just update that attachment, Alicia.
So I did change the link for it to be this instead of our current one, because this is what you guys approved.
1460.
And 1460 will be an exact, from what I got from Chris, an exact copy for 3160 and 4160.
Which is what we're looking at, right? If we update it just now?
That I
Did
did,
you
yeah,
just do
so
that?
this, not just now,
No,
I did it earlier, but this is, it's not like pretty and like how the other ones look, because it's not sent off to be updated officially. But this is what you,
Approved.
yeah, yep.
Well, and that was addressed, because I know that I had asked you about it, Alicia, and that was addressed on the email that you sent out on October 4th. That the 3160 and 4160 are linked to the policy 1460, which was, and like you're saying, it was approved at the meeting, nothing can be changed because it was approved, but it has.
So originally it was I had pulled it from our other one, thinking that it was updated, and then talked to Chris, and he wanted to
Okay.
wait for a whole batch, so that's
Okay.
that kind of piece
Okay.
of it.
Does that make sense, Lori?
Well, yeah.
You good with that?
When I opened it this morning,
It was different.
it was different. So
Yeah.
I don't know
So I
when this was changed, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I updated it, I don't know at what time, but yeah.
So that's what I had on those two.
Okay, moving on to 3122, one drug-free workplace, and 4122.01 drug-free workplace. Any questions with either of those, the drug-free workplace?
I have some questions, and maybe Chris addressed this in the meeting. And I know it says, it has to do with the medical use of marijuana and THC. And it talks about whether it's still prohibited under Wisconsin law and board policy. So I am wondering how this would work. What happens if we have an employee who lives in Minnesota or even lives in Wisconsin, but sees a physician in Minnesota? We're so close to the border that many of us do. Even the Somerset Clinic is affiliated with the Stillwater Medical Group. So what if we have someone who is undergoing cancer treatment or has chronic pain issues, arthritis, and their physician authorizes the use of medical marijuana for pain control? If they test positive, how does that work? Did Chris talk about any of that?
No, we didn't discuss that, but I mean, I would say they're, if it's lawfully prescribed, I mean, I think it's probably gonna fall under federal law, even though Wisconsin doesn't, I mean, Wisconsin's still gonna recognize the prescription.
It says in this policy that it's still unlawful under federal law and Wisconsin law and is not an exception to the drug-free workplace policy.
Yeah, but what says, it doesn't say right here, staff member unpermitted acts. If you possess a prescription, it's been lawfully prescribed,
According
not
to
in violation of this
Wisconsin
policy.
and federal.
you know?
So I don't think I don't think there is a federal law about this, is there? I think it's state by state.
Yeah, I don't know, I'd have to look at the federal law.
I think it is state by state.
But if it's state by state, then if they're in Wisconsin, even though they may have gotten it in Minnesota, it still
It's still a
goes for
valid-
Wisconsin.
It's a valid legal prescription.
So it's a valid legal prescription. So does that mean?
You said valid? No, I
No,
was saying invalid.
I was thinking the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, if you were prescribed something in Minnesota and you came to Wisconsin,
There's been a lot of talk actually with this. My husband's work has the same thing, because even though there's some, I think this would be worth looking into and going back to Chris, because I think that there's some sticky pieces with, now that it's state by state and federal, not as much, I don't think, with prescribed, but there are some pieces that, oh, okay, well, I got it here. I think 3M was going through a big thing, because 3M yes, it's Minnesota, but you have multiple different states. So even if you're, you know, if you live or get it in Minnesota, but you're going somewhere else and then you get drug tested or whatever it may be, it falls for, I don't know, there's some sticky pieces with that, so I
And
think it's.
THC is in this, my understanding is that it's in the system for a long time. It's not like alcohol where you can do an alcohol test and it's either positive or negative. My understanding is that THC can show up for quite a long time
A
after
number of
it's
days, yeah.
even months.
I don't know about months, I'm not exactly sure the time frame, but it's days. Yeah.
Anyway, that's the
Just
one thing
clarification
I'm
on it.
concerned about in this one, because I don't want to end up with an employee that we are looking at terminating because they've been prescribed.
And by the way the policy reads right now, that's exactly what would happen.
I know.
Right. So is this something you'd like me to connect with Chris about and just
See if
See if
there's an
there's
alternative
something-
way of wording this so that,
Would you somehow add the above part in green about the over-the-counter medications in accordance with the recommended doses? I don't know if it seems possible. Some type of exception.
you know, if we can get a recommendation
Yeah,
from
well, I think the
Chris.
same question exists about THC and gummies, and, you know, do we allow that to be in your system as an employee or not? You know, that's to come,
Yeah,
but I think we need to have a
I'm not-
discussion.
Yeah, I don't, I'm
But
not
that's,
even-
well, that's drug-free workplace.
Yeah, I'm not, I wouldn't be as concerned about terminating an employee because of that, but I would be very concerned about terminating an employee for who it was prescribed because of a physical health need.
I agree with that.
So that's the piece I am really concerned about.
But I guess, so I'm reading here, permitted acts, if you're in possession of a prescription drug, and prescription marijuana, I think would fall into that,
Well,
then it says you're not in violation of the policy.
but THC is broken down in the next paragraph, saying that it's still unlawful.
So if we could ask Chris for some suggested wording on how to get around this.
Yeah, it shouldn't be under permitted acts if it's saying we shouldn't do it.
Well, and I think also though, to Lori, what you're saying, how to get around it, I think we need to be careful.
That it's legal.
Well, how much do we want to get around it? I guess, like, I think that's kind of, could be a slippery slope too. We want to make sure that that's completely defined.
And in my mind, I'm looking at a prescription.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about recreational use or
Mhm.
edibles.
No, yeah, right,
or
yeah.
whatever.
So would it need to be disclosed then, that they are?
Well, because don't know a lot about this, so I'm not but even where it says hemp-derived CBD oil, you know, some of those pieces that we're saying, oh, well, yeah, I use it because it's medical to this, but I think there can be some gray areas with some of that too. I don't know, it can be a slippery slope.
Well, a lot of times when they do the drug test, you have to fill out a form ahead of time saying what you're on, so that they know that if that comes up in the specimen at the
Okay.
end, that you disclosed it and why you're on it and stuff.
Okay,
And it's not a surprise. If a surprise one comes up, then
yeah.
you're not doing something right.
So would we request though, considering it is illegal in Wisconsin, would we be requesting employees to disclose it if they are is that something that,
I don't think we want to. I think we only want to do it like Marge is saying.
It's disclosed to the lab gathering the specimen. It's
Okay.
not disclosed to the employer.
Okay.
And it's
That makes
only
sense.
disclosed to the lab if, for some reason, an administrator or whoever that would be, probably it would be an administrator, right, who would request a drug test. So the only time it would have to be disclosed is if there was a concern about somebody's performance, and then prior to taking the drug test, and I would think that they would have to have some kind of evidence that, yeah, it really was prescribed. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can show their pill bottle or.
With the prescription thing on it?
So I'm hearing, I'll connect with Chris for just his thoughts on if there's an additional recommendation regarding that piece.
Yeah.
That,
And I think just that state line, kind of how that
Yeah.
will pan out, so we know that what we're approving.
okay.
Okay, then moving on, 3161 on requested leaves of absence, fitness for duty, and then 4161 on requested leaves of absence, fitness of duty. Questions, concerns with either of those?
The only thing I was, Alicia, can you make a note to Chris to add the titles of two policies that are mentioned in here? He mentions 3122.02 and 3430.01. But there's no title, it's just the numbers. So if he could add the titles to those policy numbers?
In both, right?
Yep.
So.
Okay, just so I make sure I got it, 312202,
Yep.
and was it 340401?
3430.01.
And it'd be the same, the next one.
Yeah, they're exactly the same.
So it'll be 4122 in the next one. 4430. next one.
So they're for both 3161 and 4161.
Any more with those two? Okay, 2210 curriculum development.
Yeah, I have a question, and it's very confusing. So Alicia, would you be able to click on this? one?
Yeah, sure, yep.
Which one, sorry?
It is 2210 curriculum development.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So in the second group of letters, what's going on with D? What is that supposed to say?
Font size, 11px.
Oh. You got that one?
I can tell you what our current policy says.
I think it's just that piece that got put in the middle.
Well, but then it also talks about incorporates instruction and financial literacy into the curriculum in grades kindergarten to 12. In our current policy goes through like O, and that part about financial literacy is letter N. And I'd also like to know what happened to all the other letters. Why are they all taken out? Is there a reason? Because there was some, what I considered important curriculum items, and I think that a lot of this is specifically mentioned in the state statute.
A lot that's missing, you're saying?
Yeah. Like the financial literacy.
Did Chris mention anything with the letters that aren't there?
Our current policy goes through P.
We'll find out.
Change it, they usually read it
Yeah,
out or something
yeah.
and leave it in there so we know what they're taking out.
We'll add it to our list.
Okay.
Thank you. And in the paragraph immediately after G, it says the district administrator or designee, and we passed something, we approved something at our last meeting. I can't remember if it was in bylaws or if it was in definition. I think it was in definitions. That we said, when we say district administrator, we also mean anyone you designate, so we don't need or designee there.
So that one will be checked on. Next one, 2414, human growth and development.
Again, there were many, many options eliminated.
So
And
this one
don't-
I did ask about,
Okay,
because this one was long and a little bit complex.
yes.
So he said the deleted sections were deleted as they are no longer in statute. You can still teach those things, but they are not in statute anymore. Also, some options have been deleted as your teacher does not teach them because our group reviewed the policy. He said you will see in, oh my gosh, this one is so messy. So I think he, again, this is all over the place because he was talking about a couple different. He said you will see in 31.2 add some options back. So I think he was referring to, remember he sent like
I
3
think he was
emails
maybe saying like the next,
Update?
policy update,
to add,
that there was gonna be some other
some options are added back in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are revising a policy
Yeah.
now that we're gonna revise again.
According to Chris, that seems to be true. I don't know.
yeah.
Because we had asked him about this one, because this one was, we had the same question, because we compared it today to our current one, and there were things missing and things, but at 2:20, that's what he said. Everything
Okay.
crossed out are things that are no longer in statute, that you certainly could still have in here, but they removed. And some of it because our staff indicated they don't necessarily explicitly address it.
But then we're gonna get another update with some of these options
Yeah.
put back in because the legislature's meeting again and putting them back in? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. What I know is what he sent me.
Okay.
I know.
And I had a couple other questions on this one. Toward the end of the policy, it says a citizens advisory committee shall be established. But it doesn't say how often they're supposed to meet, if it's supposed to be yearly.
So I believe annually is what has been happening so far. I know it doesn't say it in here, but that's my understanding in talking to Trish.
And it mentions board policy 9140, which we do not have, so that should be removed.
Yeah, that one too.
Any more with that one? Let's see. Okay, next, 3121, criminal history record check and employee self-reporting requirement. And 4121, criminal history record check. Questions, concerns with either of those two? Okay, 5113, open enrollment program interdistrict.
Now, the only question I had on that was the delegating to the district administrator option taken? I couldn't tell for sure.
Are you on page 4?
Yeah, it's toward the end.
The stuff in green?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I think that was, I think his intention was to have it exactly as it's read. Unless somebody.
And not be an option, right, just add it in.
Right. Mhm.
And that's why the option thing is struck.
So that's what's his recommendation, to just put that in there, not as an option? Okay. Moving on, attendance.
Just a note on a grammatical error in the third heading, the one that says school attendance officer. The second line, or at least it's the second line on my printed copy, shall perform any duties and responsibilities required. Just take the is out.
(5215) missing and absent children. Questions, concerns with that one? 5410, promotion, placement, and retention. Questions or concerns with that policy?
Yeah, promotion from grade 4 to grade 8. Promotion from grade 4 and grade 8, that heading. The way it's worded, it's talking about criteria, but it doesn't give any criteria. And I think a simple way to address it would be to just say, a student shall be promoted from 4th to 5th grade based on the following criteria. And then you don't have to, because it says when the student meets the following criteria. So, you know, what are the criteria that you're expecting them to meet? So if you just take that part out and say based on the student's test score, their academic performance, and then you don't have to get into what exactly the criteria is, you know, what the score is, the minimum score. So a student shall be promoted from 4th to 5th grade based on the following criteria, and there's 3 of them. The 4th grade forward exam, the 8th grade forward exam, their academic performance, recommendation, additional criteria specified by the board is an option. Is that option going to be taken? Or just go with A, B, and C?
Just A, B, and C.
Okay. And the same thing with going from 8th to 9th grade. A student shall be promoted from 8th to 9th grade based on the following criteria. And it would be the 8th grade test score, the academic performance, and the recommendation of teachers.
More discussion on that? Are you, so you had a recommendation. You're saying keep what is recommended here.
Yeah, well, what's struck just, it
Right.
wasn't an option anymore, yeah.
Keep that.
Yeah, it would, yeah. What's struck is gone. A, B, C stay.
Yes.
If you want to change the wording, doesn't matter to me. When they meet, or based on, whatever.
Other feedback with that? Do we want to change the wording, take Chris's wording?
Well, if you are gonna keep it meets the following criteria, the student's score, well, then you're gonna have to say what that score has to be.
I don't know, this is one of those things that I feel like we're getting in the weeds, we're spending a lot of time on. I guess this is a question for Chris, as we still try to figure out policies. Because he swears up and down that you're protected, you're protected, you're protected, attorneys read this, everyone in the state's using this. Like, how has no one else ever questioned this? Because it does make sense the way you describe it, it should read that way. But how has no one else ever asked that question? You know, or have they, and when they do the final draft, is it changed? You know, it would be a question for Chris.
Well, okay, let's be honest. If a kid gets a certain amount on the forward exam, they're not gonna be held back. So I see why there's not an actual score put on there. Right? I mean, when's the last time a student's been held back because of a test score?
Oh, it's A, B, or C. Or and C, based on this criteria. You know, so these are the things you're looking at. And it's, you know, it doesn't say that all three have to be met. It doesn't say one out of the three have to be met. It just says these are the things we're looking at.
Let's ask Chris. We're talking to him anyways, right?
You bet, yep. Got it on the list.
Okay. 5461 children at risk of not graduating from high school.
I'd just like to note that at the end of this policy, it says an annual report concerning children at risk shall be made to the board. So this is one of the policies that we need to have a report brought to the board at the appropriate time.
Can I ask, because I truly don't know, can I make the assumption that that has not been happening with this policy? Okay.
And I don't know if this is.
Is that annual report, do you know anything about that? Because I feel like that's also kind of for us to get, I mean, that, how I read that as an annual report concerning children at risk shall be made. I'm guessing that that's a broad report, not specific children at risk.
Oh, no, we wouldn't get names, but you'd probably get numbers or something.
So I can ask around a little bit to see what other superintendents have done. I just don't know. Numbers would concern me a little bit, just because I wouldn't want to unintentionally be able to identify a student, but general area, I mean, so I'll look into it a little bit. Let's see what other people have done.
And if we're doing that, do we need to say when we're receiving that information? Would it be 2 months in advance of graduation to have an idea of how we can?
Or does that even constitute, I'm thinking annual report concerning children at risk, does that constitute as we're saying tier 3 students? Because to me, does it I mean, is it presented to you as, okay, here's our annual report as children at risk, or is that when we're getting updates throughout the year as our percentage of students not meeting criteria? I think that can be perceived in different ways.
Well, it says an annual report though, so that makes it sound like it's more formal and it's end of the year is the way I take it, but I don't know. And it might be specified in the state statute.
We have a lot of questions for Chris.
Oh, look, I got it, yep.
6114, cost principals spending federal funds.
We do not have policy 7455, which is mentioned in that policy, so it should be removed.
Is that noted? 6146.
In paragraph 4, did you want to remove the administrative guidelines?
Paragraph what was that? 4?
Paragraph 4. It's removed here, and it was in the original as an option, and I was wondering if there was a reason for taking the administrative guidelines out.
So it was in the original. See, this is what gets really confusing going back and forth, because usually I thought if something was in the original, it was in red and crossed out.
And you pulled that from where?
I asked Alicia to print these for me.
Oh, that might be the could be old then, whatever, is it the same as what's linked on there?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, then that's not the case for that one.
But is the original one what you got off board docs?
This is all green, so it should be new language.
Right, but you're taking it from the original wording that is currently on board docs.
All of this green is supposed to be new, so it shouldn't be in our active board docs.
No, but you said something was taken out,
Yeah,
correct?
right here in paragraph 4, it's what's linked to the agenda. What's linked to the agenda no longer has this policy and the related administrative guidelines. And I'm just asking if that was done on purpose, or if it was, I mean, maybe you don't want the administrative guidelines, I don't know why you wouldn't, but, you know, was it an accident? Or
That it got taken off.
I was
Yeah.
kind of worried, how did you get a copy of that?
That's what I'm
In
confused
green,
on,
when
like,
it's
where are
in
you
green,
taking
right?
this from?
I
Go.
asked Alicia to print them for me when they first came out.
So
The
they're-
original documents.
Well,
The,
that is green.
I know, but I have what you have too, but you're saying something's been taken out. So you're comparing it with the one that was prior to this, that the thing was taken out? I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
She thinks she has this printed, but they don't match.
So
What
if
you have
any
in
of
your hand
those,
doesn't
if any
match.
of those have changed since they've been printed, you wouldn't have a current one, basically. That's why I was asking if that's the same as, exactly the same as what's linked right now.
this was printed July 11th.
So if anything was changed or updated again
And I
by Chris,
specifically asked for these to be printed because I wanted to see what
Yeah, with the
the
green.
changes were being recommended from
No, but it wouldn't have been
Neola.
printed July 11th, because we just had it on last month. You're saying it was printed in September.
No, I'm saying it says right up at the top.
Because we have had these we've had these since June probably, really.
Okay.
And I purposely asked for them to be printed before anything was changed on them.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
So I could see what the
What the
original
changes were.
options were.
So that must be I'm just talking out loud. When Chris originally dropped these, you got them printed. In the meantime, Chris gave you an update, right? Which is what,
he could have changed things.
which is
yeah,
linked.
sure.
Because there can be changes.
But usually if there's changes, then he will put it in red.
But isn't the
It was
red,
never-
isn't
it was
that from
never
what our
approved.
current
Oh,
policy is?
because it was never, that makes more sense. Was like, what are we comparing
just a
this to
change
if
to the
we're not
draft.
able to see this?
I
Okay.
don't know.
So the recommendation from them is what is linked right here. That doesn't have that sentence, so we should assume that sentence shouldn't be in there.
It's not a sentence, it's just that one part about the administrative guidelines. And I'm asking, was that done deliberately?
Right.
And if so, why? Because we have administrative guidelines, or we're supposed to. And I know we got an email from you about how they need to all be gone through. And, I mean, do you want the administrative guidelines taken off?
I don't know why it's gone, so I guess I'm gonna start by asking if it was intentional and where it went, so
Okay.
I'll start with that one, and then we'll see, because I truly don't know.
Nor do I. But if it was changed, it wasn't
Yeah.
by us, like, it wasn't by us,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. 8310, public records. Questions, concerns? And last on the list, 8450, control of casual contact communicable diseases.
I'd just like to bring up in paragraph 4, when we're talking about the board following state statutes, I think we need the word shall. That's my opinion.
Mine too. And if you want to do shall follow state statutes and then put may follow health department regulations or something like that, but if it's a state statute, we follow a state statute. You were talking about it in one of the ones earlier, about following the state statutes.
No reference to that, right?
Yeah, this is straight from Chris, to use the word may. And his example was, with COVID, you know, you have sheriffs all over the country, all over the state that said, I'm not enforcing that. And that's where it came from. So he said, may allows you can follow it. If you have local or county government that says, we're not doing this,
That's
you're-
more of the health
you're okay.
department. The sheriffs don't make their own rules. They can't. They have to follow rules. So that should be shall, and the other ones can be may.
I think it should be made. That was Chris's recommendation. We can all have,
Well,
we can all have
I don't agree with him.
That's okay.
He needs to look up the meaning of statute.
I would not want the district to be liable for a situation because we were not following the law. I think it puts the district at risk. That's my opinion.
Matt, I felt like you spoke to this one, I'm sorry, these are running together, but Matt, a couple months ago with the whole shall and may. And we did switch it on one.
We've addressed it, we've talked about this, I wish Ian was here, we've talked about this policy several times. But that's where we landed, was the recommendation from Chris and from Neola was that the word of may is just fine. And it was due to that example of, if you have a state government that says, this is now the law, you must follow it, and the county sheriff says, I'm not going to enforce it. Whether the statute exists or not, if there isn't an enforceable entity, then you don't have to follow it. And that was the example he used. Whether or not that's the right thing, we can all agree,
If it's a
disagree.
statute, you follow it.
But
If
I
you
think
have
then
a
you go-
jurisdiction that is going to enforce it,
But then I think you take that one step further because you're correct with what you're saying, but then we've talked about funding within schools because then you have,
And that's
when
when
you
we kept
don't-
following it before. One was a state statute because we didn't want to lose funding. And
because
that
of
was
the
our
funding
topic
piece,
before.
because of the state statute with being a public education. I get what you're like with,
well, yeah, this is Chris's recommendation, and he has said many times, their attorneys review these. You are fully protected if you have a contract with Neola, and this is where your policies come from. This isn't just someone making up language. I mean, there is thought behind it, there is reason behind it, and that's where it comes from.
I wouldn't mind having him address this one and just maybe, before we've had Chris give us write-ups and emails, kind of back to the whole board on certain topics. Maybe this one's worth him addressing the may, shall on that line. We could shoot something out to everybody and then we all can read what he's.
Just so I'm clear, you want me to ask him about the may shall, and you want him to write a response, and then I can share the response with you so you know directly from him? Is that what I just want to make sure I'm
Yeah,
getting what
just
you're
to make
asking
sure that
for.
he's checked that, that we're not,
Risking state
That-
funding or?
yeah,
putting the
state fund,
district
yeah,
at
something if we
risk?
decide if we may follow, we decide not to follow, what is gonna be at risk to seniors that.
Just hearing kind of what you're describing, I actually might just go to Trevor. I think if you're really getting into the weeds of, the legal piece,
the may
You
and
know,
shall. I feel
Chris
like
is
we've
not-
gone over this may and shall, and it just circles back and back
Right.
again, and I'm just,
I'm happy to get you whatever is helpful for your discussion. Listening to the direction that it's going, I think having our attorney weigh in my own opinion, would be a good place just to, he can send us whatever his vision is and I can send it to all of you. That's just where my head goes. If we're really worried about being at risk of state funding, I hear you, then I would feel better getting his,
So
The
you
only
look at
thing
the
would be is,
example of like Burnett County, that sheriff came out right off the bat and said, we're not doing this, we're not gonna follow it. So if you don't have a force that's going to walk into the school and say that it's illegal, what you're doing is illegal.
But if the chief of police in Somerset said, I'm not enforcing it, but the county said I am, then what do we do? So I mean, that's kind of what we're saying, is the county's saying, well, we're not enforcing it, but the state's saying, you have to do this. So, I mean, if Chris is saying we're not at fault, then,
Is he gonna come to court with us?
he's checking.
he will, yeah, I mean,
all that
they,
stuff.
that's the thing, is Neola backs these policies, they back the creation, yeah, so that would be my question about Trevor is, does Trevor understand where
Yes.
this policy's coming from? Okay.
I would take his word to the bank.
He takes it.
Yeah.
Listen, it's been a lot less than just, I hear you, yes, but I'm happy to.
No, I think what
direct
this-
it, but I think,
Even just that language, it tells anyone watching this, anyone going to our district, it tells them that we take this serious. We are going to consider health department and statute and all of these suggestions and protocols, but we're not gonna force our students, our staff to follow something they don't believe in. I think that's what it says. It doesn't say we're not going to do anything, but it says that they can put their trust in us as a board to make the right decision. I think it's a
Well, I know
big,
there's a lot of them against it, but if it's a state statute, it's a state statute. End of discussion.
if it's enforceable, and we could go through the list of state statutes that exist on the books that are not enforced, that are not,
But they could be.
but they're not, and the courts have said we're not enforcing them. So then what? What if the Supreme Court in Wisconsin says we're taking no action on this statute that's on the books? Do we have to follow it?
Are we okay just
I don't
having
know what your
Trevor
conscience
address
is.
it?
I don't know, maybe we could,
Are we okay just having Trevor address it?
I would feel comfortable.
Let's just have him address it, and then we could be,
Because I am saying, like, if Chris is saying, okay, Shell covers it, and Trevor is saying that, but if we're not backed by that, I think that it's our due diligence to make sure that we're using the wording that is going to keep us all.
keep our district.
but I'm just saying one last thing. The only thing is it, why are we spending the money to talk to Trevor when we're spending the money with Neola? That's what we have Neola for. We took their policy. So if we don't trust them and we're gonna go to our own attorney, then why are we
How
doing
many
this?
other issues have we found in the policies tonight? that-
Well, then why are we using Neola?
Because with Neola, they keep track of which state statutes are changing, and they bring those to our attention. We do not have a full-time employee watching every single legislative action and how that relates to our policies. That's what we're paying Neola for.
Okay, but Chris has also said we're paying them for the creation as well. And we've had this discussion many times about the grammatical things. Chris has always said they don't matter, we fix those.
But we just got an email saying that if there's something that needs to be fixed, make a note of it and Chris will change it. So you have to bring it up so a note can be made so he can fix it. I mean, if those little things like grammatical errors, if you want me to just send an email to Alicia separately, not at the board meeting, I'm perfectly fine with that. But that's a board decision. I'm not
No, I
taking
think that that's
Yeah.
exactly what should be done. I think that this
I
is
think it's
great,
good.
that this is a board, because I think, I'm gonna go back, I said at our last meeting, that this goes back to kind of when we were with Lady, hey, what the work we do, let's have it as a board, because I think that, but I also think we need to be mindful a little bit of like some of those little pieces, is that, what's the why? Is that really switching these policies, or are we looking, I mean, and it's really hard, I'm gonna be really honest, when you have documents that other people don't have documents of, and those pieces, so I think I think this is also something that just can be brought up at that next meeting with Chris, because I then also feel like now Shannon's going back to Chris with a lot of questions, and I'm gonna go back to our board development again. I think that policies are the board's, you know, this is one of our main things as a board. I think sometimes we are worrying about other things we don't have to worry about, and policy is one of the things we do. So I think there's a fine line about being, okay, I think we all need to be on the same page as far as it goes as well, because I don't wanna put all this on Shannon when really this is kind of us on the board. If that makes sense. And now you're going back with all these things where I think it would be really helpful that next, you know, some of these concerns, some of these things that are coming up to discuss with Chris. But I have a hard time going back with little grammatical errors to Chris when we have everything. I mean, there's a lot here. Okay, sorry, that didn't really make a lot. I think we can move on and get a lot of those questions addressed, but I think it's gonna also then probably have a whole other strew of maybe questions that might come from his answers before our next meeting.
Okay, just to clarify, am I connecting with Chris or Trevor or neither on this last policy?
I think we should follow your recommendation, Shannon. As much as I don't particularly care to ask Trevor questions.
Oh, didn't know where you were going with it. Okay, got it. Yeah.
But I think, was your recommendation that you trusted what Chris was giving us?
I think as a board, you have to land in a spot that you're all comfortable. And so if you are truly worried about the district not getting funding, that was the red flag in my head of, then I think we need to go beyond Chris and rely on our own district lawyer to give the feedback. So that's my answer.
And along with funding, also liability.
Okay, I think I've got the direction. Yes? Okay.
So these will go back to our business session, but I have to be really honest, I'm just leery of all the things we're going back to Chris as far as questions, and then taking this back to our business session to approve. But if we have questions prior, we can ask them, and maybe it will take a little bit more time at our work session. Okay, moving on, board development. So when we met with Lee, we talked about Shannon, and I just linked this prior because I didn't really want it. It wasn't anything that needed to be linked a long time ahead. But these are just complete suggestions on areas that we could look at as a board, that we want to set goals for ourselves. And I think that we, made a point of this during our retreat to say, hey, if we're having our staff having goals and admin and superintendent having goals, what are our goals as a board? And I'm not sure how you guys felt, but I think that there was a lot of really good takeaways as far as that. I think we put a lot of time and nights in as a board as far as things that we could get out of it. And I think it'd be useful, instead of saying, okay, we met with them those 2 nights, now we're done, to almost even include this like monthly, even just on the agenda, like what are we doing as a board to make sure that we're working together to do the things we should be doing. So here were 6 of his recommendations. We can't have all 6. These were just kind of some ones that, you know, what are some areas as a board that we want to focus on? What are areas that we can improve on? If that is a route that all of us as a board would like to take, and then I think the next step's not during this meeting or this month, but then, okay, how are we gonna measure it ourselves? I know when Shannon and I had talked about it, okay, we've done the school perception survey. I'll look at the last time we did the school perception survey, there's a part with the board. What have we really done with some of that information, and how can we make sure that we're doing, you know, what we should be doing, and kind of giving ourselves some self-evaluation as well, so. Thoughts, there's 6 different suggestions that Lee had put together and sent Shannon's way, and now coming to me. So establish plan to support the new administration, support of the strategic plan process, review, refine, and update policy, continue board development, that feedback to superintendent regarding performance at least twice per year, preferably quarterly, and that will come more as far when we get deeper into your goals. And then another idea was contribute to quarterly newsletter, which would be, yes, our Spartan Scoop comes out weekly, but that we could have something put in quarterly. Is this a route as a board that we'd like to use Lee's suggestion and come up with board goals to move forward? Are you guys on board with that, I guess, first and foremost? And if the consensus is yes, we think as a board it would be beneficial to develop some goals for ourselves, what 2 or 3 of these would we want to narrow it down to? So I guess first and foremost, as a board, are you guys on board for creating goals for ourselves?
Yes. And looking at this, the top 3 for me would be support of the strategic plan, review, refine, update policy, and continue board development. Those would be my top 3. I think support of the strategic plan is a plan to support the administration. Board development, I think, is important for us. And then obviously, we just had a discussion about policy is one of our main things that we need to figure out still. I mean, every time we talk about policy, we have this conversation about Chris, so I think we need to continually try to refine that process.
And I mean, it doesn't have to be narrowed just to these either. If people had other ideas, I mean, we could add different things that you think that we could work on as a board. It doesn't have to just be this. These are just suggestions.
I like those as well, Matt, because I think the one for feedback to superintendent, I think we have to do that anyway. So I don't think we can really make it a goal. We have to, and then the goal would be doing it more often. But we have to do it, so I don't.
Well, I think, you know, we have to update policy, but I like how every time I feel like we get into policies, it becomes okay, how are we gonna do this? I know, I mean, I think I had said before, it's like we've kind of went different ways, and I think that there's a way that we can all work together to develop a process that works for all of us. I'd really like the policy to be one of our goals, review, refine, and update policy. Because yes, as you're saying, Bruce, yeah, we have to update policy, but how can we do that? How can we improve how we're doing it and how we're doing that as a board? So Bruce, Matt, you're up for board goals. Other feedback? And this is something, since I just linked it ahead, I mean, this is something you guys can think about. It's not any decisions that we have to make tonight. I think just linking this, like Shannon's linking her goals, I think it also, when we link it to our an agenda or you just have these discussions when we have these public meetings. I think it's also showing the community and our schools and things that, you know, we're trying to do the best job ourselves as well and evaluating how we can do it efficiently and together.
When the time comes to establish these, can we consider bringing Lee in, who's part of the two-day development, to essentially help identify those and kind of give us some routes on what's the next steps?
You can?
What, yeah, I
What's
just
the
think,
cost of that?
I think we just gotta make sure they're measurable. I mean,
Well, it's-
support the strategic plan process. Go, Shannon, get it done.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is if we're gonna identify what are the steps? I think we need some guidance.
Yeah, I mean, we gotta have measurable goals, and, I mean, yeah, I get it, kinda just think about how we're going to measure these and do these as a board.
And
Because
if-
we tried the board development, when I first got on here, we tried to do it monthly, and then made a third meeting every month,
Oh, yeah.
and that was too much.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't wanna continue board development, but you can't have
Marge, you made the comment of there's a cost to it, but I also feel like when we put some of that cost, we've kind of started that process, so I don't think this is something we need to have retreat nights monthly, you know, I think that's a lot, but I think if we're gonna invest what we already started, continuing to make sure that we're getting the most out of it. I mean, when I first got on the board, we had WASB, and we had a great night with WASB, and then it was like, we did it, we were done with it. And that was a cost too, when we did it. So I feel like if we're going to, we do professional development with our staff, we do professional development with admin. If we're overseeing all that, I think that it's important that we have some development in it. And I agree, Bruce, I'm with you, I don't think it's anything that we have to add another meeting a month, but if we're seeing all those places that we think need development and we're overseeing, then I think that we need to all be on the same page and know what we're working towards to be able to support all of those areas as well. That's my opinion.
If we have someone here, it could be a 30-minute discussion on a work night about what are the 3 goals, what are the first couple action steps, and that's all it has to be.
Well, I think before we do that, we want to choose our 3.
Yeah,
Like,
oh yeah, right, yep.
I know he had mentioned coming back to a couple meetings, and that cost in particular is already factored into what we paid him already. I think it was up to 3 visits coming to meetings, so you already kind of have that sitting there in terms of that support, however you choose to use it. So I would just need to know potential dates.
And I had thought when we left our second night, it was my impression that he was gonna be here tonight to talk with us about goals and also talk with us about Shannon's goals. And he said something about the superintendent evaluation process also. I thought that he was gonna be on the agenda for tonight.
Why tonight?
Because that's what I thought he said, the second night of our retreat. I thought he said he was gonna be at the October work session.
So I think he was indicating that we would use October for us to kind of, right, so I bring my goals to you guys having some initial discussions about goal, and I think his goal was November.
Okay.
The way I remember it, but I think.
And we can circle back with Lee. Are you guys comfortable? Can we look at, or let's say November, do you guys want some time to sit on this? And when we come for our business session, we can narrow it down to 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we
yeah.
try to get him on the schedule for the November work session?
Yep, I'll send him a message tomorrow.
Okay, also then with, this comes discussion of meeting minutes, and I think, Lori, I had come back, I think, and referred, I know that Alicia and Shannon have been kind of looking at some other, meeting minutes from different districts. I've been on our website, and if you look at past archived minutes, it's like we have minutes that are pages long with every detail. We have some minutes that you're like, are as bare bones as can be. So in looking at old minutes, there's kind of the gamut. So with the current one is linked there, but this is our current policy. Sorry, that we have as far as meeting minutes.
I think our current policy is fine. I don't think we want every bit of discussion noted, but when someone is, the end of the policy says, and if requested, remarks of board members and or administration.
So I think that's where, and why it's kind of coming up. I know I've gotten some things following up from a couple of meetings, like this wasn't in there. And I just wanna make sure that we're going about our minutes, so what's, easiest for Alicia, but we're meeting the needs of everybody here at the table. And then just attaches meeting minutes. I think sometimes where it's gotten hard is because then after those meeting minutes come out to us before they're approved, there's been questions like certain comments aren't on those minutes, and when are those added and when are those not? And I know that in the policy it says, and if requested, remarks of board members and or administration. Is that taken as, if I make a comment, it's Alicia didn't put it down on minutes, and then when the minutes come out, I say, oh wait, I want this verbatim in our minutes.
How long do those have to be kept? Because in here it just says bound together by years and kept in the office of the board. And I'm thinking, what does that mean?
There's a lot online.
Yeah. By years? I mean, most records have to be kept for at least 10 years, I think.
Mhm.
But I don't know how these.
I don't know.
Alicia has been cleaning out the vault. How many years do the minutes go back?
All the years.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
All of them, yeah. There's more than you could ever imagine back there.
And I don't.
Way beyond 10, for sure. So we probably could clean, but.
And I think it is referenced in the statute, how long you have to keep them.
I think if I can just say, I think what would help is if there is something, where that says if requested, if there is something that someone at the table really feels strongly about, that I want to make sure that this said by me is in the minutes, it'd be great if we could do that here, so she's not left kind of guessing and then having to script and almost writing a narrative. And then sometimes, speaking for you, sorry, but sometimes having to go back and then watch the whole meeting again because she's trying to do a really good job and make sure that everyone's right. So I think obviously we'll put in whatever you need to put in, and if you individually want to make sure something is on the minutes, I think just a time saver would be being able to just really make it public right here that.
Like if you're making a comment to say, I would like it noted in the minutes that
Yep. Yes. Because anyone can go back and watch a video and see exactly what was
that's
said.
where I go back and forth, because the ones that are very, very detailed were before we were on television where you could go. So I think that's where, in sake of Alicia, and I think some of the times where some of those questions have come back, it's like, oh no, did I forget that, or should I put that in? Where then it gets sticky because somebody wants something included and I or somebody else may have said another comment right behind it, but that's not included. And that's where I feel a little uneasy sometimes when then we come back after the fact, because if this is noted, well then it'd be nice if that was noted too. So, but I don't think it's necessary to put all of that within the minutes when it's on television. So would it help, or are you comfortable, as Shannon's saying, if you make note of something, to say it at that time that I would like this in the minutes?
I'm guessing
I'm fine with that.
Do you have the running tally time of the live stream?
Like a breakdown of when certain things were discussed? What do you mean?
Like on your computer, are you able to see like where we're at right now? Like if you're looking at the live stream, 1 hour, are you able to see like 1
Oh,
hour?
2 hours and 34
We talked
minutes
about
in.
this
Oh,
at
no,
7 o'clock.
no.
I was just, yeah.
Yeah, because I
That's
think
why I was
that
wondering,
would
like,
be
every time
helpful,
we
like,
changed-
when this topic came up, it was
Right.
this time, and then, no, I don't have that.
I was just, yeah, if it was
Yeah,
playing
sorry, I
live,
see
I
what
could
you're saying
say,
now.
or every time we move to a new
Right,
topic, we could have the time.
Oh,
yeah,
So someone could
unfortunately,
look back, so you don't,
unfortunately, no.
yeah, that's fine.
And sometimes we have technical issues and
Right.
there is no video. So I'm fine with trying to make a note of it during the meeting. But I think it's important that we also have the option to come back later. And maybe it needs the full board approval, or it needs to be a board discussion.
I like that piece.
Mhm.
I think that that's exactly, like, if then, so then we're not putting that on Alicia in between. If those meetings come out and you'd like something added that you're like, oh no, I didn't say I'd want that noted, if you could save that to the meeting, so then we can just kind of have that as a
Discussion.
Yeah. Is everybody okay with that? I just keep going back. I think one of the things that really stuck out, and one of the things as we were talking with Lee in this board development, is that, yes, I know this is a longer meeting, but we're having the discussions as a board, not just an email between, like you and I, or you and or whoever that may be. I think that it may take longer, but I think it puts us all, knowledgeable of what's happening and on the same page versus putting it, in the hands of one or two people.
If I may add too, I really struggle with the once around the table, because if I feel like if I don't script it and I shorten it in a version that maybe isn't representing what you're saying, so that's another piece of that.
And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that later.
Great.
Because we've kind of, okay. So topics for action, personnel update. Recommend the athletics activities personnel update. There's quite a few names, so hopefully some additions.
I'll make a motion to approve 11A 1 and 2.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
You beat me, Bruce.
Okay,
I covered
sorry,
it.
I could have said this, once we're on the table. So, when Shannon had went to, and Shannon, maybe I can start to speak, but when Shannon had went to, a couple weeks ago, one of the conferences she was at, one of the topics that she kind of had brought back was the once around the table and how to make that once around the table effective and meaningful and what kind of steps to do. Do you want to, will you speak to it?
Yeah,
just a
so I
little
think
bit?
one of the great things is that having some type of once around the table like we have was identified by multiple presenters as something that high functioning boards do. So awesome, we've got this really great avenue where, there you go, where it's the only time really that you can talk outside of what's on the agenda. And it's kind of morphed a little bit since the original kind of inception from way back when. The idea was being able to bring something to the table that you would like to see on a future agenda. And it's kind of morphed into celebrations and things like that, which is great. I mean, those things should still continue. My recommendation was from multiple professionals down in Madison was adding this piece next to it that says discussion, possible action. So you can still do the shout outs of the dance team and all, that's awesome, continue to do that, I think that's great. But they had suggested that when someone brings up an idea or something that they would like to see that requires action, that you don't leave here without agreeing upon as a board if that is something that you're going to actually fulfill, right? Or put on the next agenda. So again, kind of what Lacey's saying, you're doing your work as a board and not individual board members requiring something to happen. That you have a discussion of if it's something everybody wants to see or report that you want made or whatever that looks like, you literally have the vote here And if the majority of the people want to continue with that request, great. If not, then it doesn't make it onto the agenda. So that was the idea. So I brought that back to Lacey. I think that would help clarify at times some confusion that I've seen in the past, that when an individual makes a request, like everyone's not quite sure what happens next. Should administration do something with it? Should we bring it back to the next meeting? Do we wait? Do we, right? So we want to get you the information that you want, but the recommendation was that that recommendation doesn't come individually, it comes as a board. So that was one of my big takeaways. So bravo for having Once Around the Table, because a bunch of districts were like, what was that? What do you guys do? So well done. This just helped kind of define a little bit the purpose of why it's on here, to actually kind of help you in your work, and then allow us to be able to get you whatever it is you're asking for as a majority of the board.
And I think, Alicia, that would maybe solve, as you're saying, if I didn't get it down, if it is something then that needs action for the next agenda or something else to be discussed, then it wouldn't be, okay, let's go to the next person. We'd actually stop and discuss and have a vote at that time. Yes, majority, let's take it to the next. And I don't think it, when we say majority, I don't think it's necessarily something that, oh, we need to sit and debate about it, but hey, yeah, I'd be interested in that too. That sounds good. Have the discussion, vote on it, and then we know it's a little bit more laid out, I think, for next steps. And your concerns or needs, I think, are validated a little bit more at the time as well.
So can I ask, is that looking like, if there is any motions on the table, those are the things that I'm recording? But what about congratulations to the dance team, or good luck to the track, like, things like that?
I think it's always nice if you're able to put that on, because I think a lot of, some of those people, when those little shout outs that we're putting, like, oh, it was great, I know, went back to school. Or if I say, hey, homecoming, it was awesome seeing all the school spirit last week. I think sometimes if people aren't watching it, it's nice to have some of those shout outs written.
Because I'm sure they read the minutes.
Yeah.
If they don't watch the
If they don't watch
video,
the
I'm
video,
sure they read the
they
minutes.
might watch the video. They're short.
It's more concise, Lori.
I can send out personal emails too, that's fine as well. I just think sometimes the positives are always nice to note as well.
So I'll just say, if I shorten
Hey,
it
I can read
to
the
a bullet
minutes
point.
in a matter of 5 minutes. I could watch a meeting in a matter of 2.5 hours.
Clock is wrong.
I agree.
I agree, Lacey.
Lori?
I agree with you.
We almost got there. There we go.
Sorry.
I
Almost
just
got
want
it.
to point out that in our policy, it does not take a majority of the board to have an item put on the agenda. It only requires 2 board members.
I was just gonna ask what the policy said.
Pardon me?
I was just gonna ask what the policy said, because I thought it did speak to it.
So even if our policy is saying 2, I think though, still if we stop to make sure, then we have 2.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think just that discussion to further validate it and move it on. So maybe it wouldn't necessarily be a formal vote per se, but at least another person saying, yes, I agree with that, or if nobody else, then I think, right? Sounds good. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, well, let's go to our Once Around the Table.
I thought that
Who's
was
first?
it. I thought that was it.
Marge, you want to start? You have anything?
I just was thinking the other day when I was going for a walk about this Prairie project. Did that get dropped off the table, or what happened to it?
So that's a good question. It's still there. Last year, and again, I'm still kind of playing catch up a little bit, but there was a farmer that accidentally planted all his seeds in our prairie. So there's still some follow-up from that. But I was just gonna say, I can check in with Keaton, but I don't know, is that what I should be doing? Because, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is where it gets a
That's
little
where
bit
I
like,
think
she's
so-
got a good question.
Right.
Right? This is where I just want to make sure I have clarity of like, I'm happy to give you some information. Does that make sense? I mean,
You know what I
Yes,
mean?
I'd like to follow up.
There you go.
Perhaps-
It's been seconded. I will find out.
Perhaps Keaton would like to bring some of his biology students to a board meeting to talk about what they've been doing in the prairie. I have no idea if he wants to do that or not, but I don't
Yeah,
know,
we'll
is
check in.
this something that we have to have an answer to at our next meeting, or could it be at Keaton's pleasure?
Or a suggestion for our student reps to include maybe in your, they wanted to gather some of that
Yeah.
information and they could present it. Anything else, Marge?
No.
Lori?
I thought, and this might have been a misunderstanding on my part, but I thought last time in the ones around the table, I thought we had agreed that we would talk about, Shannon had said something, had included in her weekly update about, one of the conferences you were at was about the 21-23 budget was a 2-year freeze for K through 12 schools. And you had in there the request for school board advocacy. And I asked more about what that would look like. And we talked about writing an official letter. And I thought that it was agreed that it was going to be on this agenda, but I maybe
No, you were correct.
misunderstood.
I actually thought about that today, because we did discuss if we could, and that was partly my vote, we discussed if we could somehow link it, or if we brought it up on an agenda, then I think we had talked like, oh, if there were letters to the legislature, like legislation, or, you know, going forward, then there'd be that information. Yeah, I have it.
So maybe we could talk about that again at the November work session. Maybe that could be an item on the agenda.
Yeah, I have it down on my notes, I'm sorry, add on agenda fiscal cliff ahead, just that district level, the budget outlook to kind of give a, because I think we had the last time at the meeting, I think Shannon, you're like, do you want me to go get Dave? And I was like, that's a lot.
Yeah, yep. And I know he put a few things in the update this past weekend. I think wasn't related to budget, in addition to McGrath.
It was more like
the
what ifs.
referendum money?
It was more like what ifs, if that
Yeah.
fiscal cliff comes.
So I think
what
that
are
was his-
some things that we could maybe do to be a little bit proactive as.
Yeah. So I think that was his way in the update, was giving you
Okay.
some information for that part. So I think that was part one. The advocacy thing, I think, was kind of part two, if I'm right? If I'm hearing you correctly.
We wanted to draft a letter as a board, right? Is that what it
Yes.
Well,
was?
we
Yep.
talked about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I remember reading in the weekly update from Dave about budget stuff, it was pretty vague. And I guess I was hoping that he could just, and maybe at the November, I don't know, maybe at, it would be nice if it could be done at this regular session coming up, because this was something that Lee had brought up in our retreat about state funding of education. You know, he doesn't have to give us any answers about, you know, this is what we're gonna have for a budget, but if this happens, these are the outcomes. This is the impact that it has on a school district. If the state does not you know, I think it should come from Dave, not me, that if the state does not increase funding, we have revenue caps, and the only way to make up the difference is local funding. You know, and I'm sure Dave has way more details on all that than I do.
So I'm hearing you say that ideally, him coming to the October regular session to
That's
give an update.
what I am proposing. I think it's
Yeah, let's have
important.
Dave come to I'll second that item.
Okay. So October, versus November work session.
Please.
Okay.
And you want a forecast of if this, then this?
I don't want a forecast, I just want an outline of, if this happens, this is the situation the district's in. You know, these are our alternatives. If we don't get increased state funding, these are our only options.
Right.
And then Dave mentioned about Leslie Thomas. She has been applying for those ESSER and DCF grants since the summer of 2020. And she has gotten so many of them. And I just wanted to thank her for her continued work in that area.
Thanks, Lori. Yeah? I will kind of go off of what Shannon had said last week for homecoming. It was really neat to see school spirit, and I'd actually mentioned, I'm like, you know, so many districts, I feel like that's just all centered at the high school with bringing that sense of community, and having kids in middle school and elementary. I saw it across our entire district, which was really neat. I know, shout out to, you had put in your scoop, Mrs. Pulfis and Mrs. Emerson for just some of the work that they did, making sure to get all of that parade and things together, and I think just staff in general for getting some of that school spirit and positivity across our campus, so. Bruce?
Sorry, another one for Dave maybe, but as he's looking into the stipend for special certifications or whatever, and then he's gonna be talking to Leslie about that group, is there another option or something possibly as we're looking for things to do for our staff, this kind of bonus or perks or whatever, but that before and after school care as being covered or paid for our staff? You know, for teachers who have kids at elementary or middle school, have to drop them off. If they have to drop them off early, they have to pay, you know, for that every day. Or if they want to stay late, they have to pay for that additional care if we have staff. And this is just me throwing out there. I don't know what that even looks like or how much that would cost or who would pay for it. But if you're a teacher or a staff member here, you don't need to pay for that before and after school care. It's just something I was throwing out there as a possible
Other ways
perk for
instead of
our
just-
staff. So that, I mean, it would help our teachers, they can show up early or stay a little late, heck, I don't have to rush.
Or their kids
Outta
aren't
here.
sitting in their classroom and they could be having fun.
Yeah, just,
An idea to look at.
yeah.
I would
just
also like
another
information if
perk.
that could be a possibility.
Oh, boy.
It's
Look
very
what we've started.
effective.
I love it. I love it. Got it.
So it would kind of spread it out then more than just the specialized people, would spread out some of that.
Yeah, and I mean,
bonuses and
it's,
stuff.
you know, there's some who this would not serve at all,
Yeah.
you know, obviously, but there's some that, you know, a younger teacher or something doesn't have to,
Yeah.
or if they're, and it's for kids who probably have in
School
school, I
age.
guess, it'd be the school age kids. You know, so that your elementary schooler doesn't have to, you can drop them off if you're a high school teacher, a middle school teacher or something like that.
But you're not talking
Um,
stipend so much as an added perk for
Yeah.
working here, and then you get, okay.
Yeah, like I can drop my, you know, cause it's,
Yep.
can't drop your kid off before 7:45. Well, if
Yeah.
I'm a teacher, I can drop my kid off at 7:15 and then go over to the high school and start my day, type thing, instead of the kid waiting and then being walked over by somebody. I don't know.
I'll ask some questions.
I'm going to piggyback off of the school spirit. We sat there on Main Street watching the parade go by, and my staff and I were just in awe of how amazing it was. And you had all the grades and all the sports, and Cheryl is about the same age, and we both said our communities didn't do anything like this. So just so fabulous that the community rallied around it. There were a lot of people there. The kids were having fun. It was amazing. So kudos to you guys. Keep doing it.
Okay. Then, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 8:54.